Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rosalia Jara. Rosalia Daniela Jara was born on September 12, 1997 in Fort Ole, a small town in the Vera department of Santa Fe, Argentina. She grew up in a close-knit family with limited means. Her mother, Liliana Jara, was the head of the family. Rosalia spent her childhood and adolescence in Fortin, where she attended primary school in a neighborhood called San Jose Obre. She aspired to become either a teacher or a police officer. She is known to be kind and thoughtful, especially to her family. When she was in 6th grade, she met Juan Oscar Valdez, a teacher, and they quickly secretly dated each other. At the time, she was only 13 years old, while Juan was 32 and married. Rosalia only shared this relationship with her sister, and her mother only found out when she became pregnant. After Rosalia gave birth to a daughter named Alma, Juan distanced himself and refused to acknowledge Alma's as his child. About a year later, Rosalia began living with a man named Aldo. There was a large age difference between them. This relationship did not go very well, and after another conflict, they decided to break up. On Saturday, July 1, 2017, Rosalia visited her mother Liliana, asking her to take care of her 2-year-old daughter, Alma. After that, Rosalia left home, taking very few belongings. Liliana assumed that Rosalia would be back soon, but that was not the case. That evening, Rosalia wears a red sports jacket, blue jeans, and new pink sneakers. Rumor has it that she went out to play cards with the US $20 she borrowed. She claimed she needed to make some money and wanted to try her luck. Around 9:00 p.m., Liliana called Rosalia, who said she was at a bar, enjoying the evening with friends while playing 5-card stud poker. She didn't mention anything concerning during their conversation, and this was the last time they spoke. Around 10:00 p.m., Rosalia was seen leaving a bar while talking on her cell phone and heading towards a checkpoint. After midnight, her mother, Liliana, tried repeatedly to reach her, but received no response. The following day, her mother went to the city police station to report her daughter, Rosalia, missing. Liliana found it unusual that she had not returned home, as Liliana knew how much her daughter valued family. However, the police were not interested in what Liliana said and refused to conduct a search. They argued that Rosalia, 19 years old, may have voluntarily left home. Days passed, and local authorities took no action to find Rosalia. A week after she went missing, local feminist groups organized a protest to pressure law enforcement. On the 11th day since she disappearance, authorities finally began search operations in Fort Ole and nearby areas. They conducted a careful search of the area and eventually discovered several items believed to belong to Rosalia. However, these findings did not help them find her. It is worth noting that after Rosalia went missing, most of the authorities' attention was focused on Juan. The police discovered that he left his home around 9 p.m. on July 1, driving a white Toyota Corolla, which partially matched the route Rosalia was believed to have taken. He returned home after 1 a.m. Witnesses near the bar reported seeing a similar white car with tinted windows around that time. Apparently, Juan was aware that the police suspected him of being involved in Rosalia's disappearance, which explains why he damaged his phone right before the authorities confiscated his phone. Rosalia's call history and phone location analysis revealed some important information, data related to Juan. On the night of her disappearance, there were about 20 calls between their 2 mobile numbers, most of which were initiated by Juan. Additionally, geolocation data from antenna signals indicated that Rosalia's and Juan's phones were close to each other at one point. Additionally, GPS data also showed that Juan's car was in the area during that time. Based on evidence and testimony from several witnesses, Juan was arrested in late July 2017. In early August 2017, The police organized a series of operations to clarify the chronology of incident related to Rosalia's disappearance. A representative of the Ministry of Security confirmed that during these operations, several searches took place simultaneously. One search took place at the local health department, while two others were organized at the homes of several police officers who were later suspected. The main goal of the search at the medical center was to find evidence suggesting that Rosalia may have had an abortion shortly before she went missing. However, this hypothesis was dismissed. Meanwhile, the search for Rosalia, the missing girl, continued. The main suspect, Juan, refused to testify about his relationship with her and about the many calls he made on the day she was last seen. In April 2018, during a hearing in the city of Vera, the judge rejected a request from Juan's lawyer to allow him to remain free. The judge decided that he should remain in custody indefinitely, as there was still a risk that he could influence witnesses. However, Juan's lawyer stated that the prosecution lacked evidence to link he to the crime. The lawyer emphasized that he had been cooperating with authorities from the start. The lawyer also dismissed the prosecution's claim that Juan intentionally damaged his phone to destroy evidence. On August 26, 2018, two hunters discovered human remains near a stream in the city of Londrina. The remains included a skull and several bone fragments. Alongside these, a pink sports jacket, sneakers, and other personal items believed to belong to the victim were found. Rosalia's family identified most of these items. The remains were sent to the Institute of Forensic Medicine for anthropological analysis. Police then went to the home of Aldo, Rosalia's ex-boyfriend, where she had lived prior to her disappearance. With Aldo's permission, they searched the house for a lock that matched a key found in the sports jacket's pocket. However, Aldo explained that he had to break the front door locks because he had not lived there for a long time and didn't know where his keys were. On September 8, 2018, investigative police officers conducted several procedures related to this case. The first procedure took place at the Municipal Health Service Department, where blood samples were taken from Liliana and her granddaughter Alma. The aim is to determine whether their DNA matches that of the remains that have been found. The Argentine Institute of Forensic Medicine confirmed that the remains found belonged to Rosalia, with a nearly 100% probability. Although forensic experts were unable to determine the cause of her death, it was clear that she had been murdered by violence, as evidenced by severe injuries to her left cheekbone, which had destroyed her skull. For Gustavo Monzon, the prosecutor in charge of the case, the evidence collected became a crucial step in the investigation. After completing all procedures, Rosalia's remains were returned to her family for burial. After it was confirmed that she had died from physical abuse, the State Attorney General's office decided to change the crime classification to homicide. More than a year and a half after her disappearance, the case finally moved to the public trial stage. In 2018, Juan Valdez was charged with Rosalia's murder. His lawyer has objected to this, arguing that the actual reasons for Rosalia's death were not determined. After hearing this, the court ordered the exhumation of her remains for further examination. Several months later, the original judge was dismissed due to allegations of bias against Juan. On July 2, 2019, the new judge began reviewing the case and denied Juan's attorney's request to revoke the pretrial detention order. Local media have been regularly reporting on key points in the investigation. In particular, Attorney General Gustavo Monzon has suggested that Juan killed Rosalia simply because she asked for child support for Alma, whom Juan acknowledged as his child. Gustavo claimed that just a day before Rosalia's disappearance, she had called Juan to voice her frustrations about his refusal to help with child support. Returning to the trial, it is important to clarify the prosecution's main hypothesis. On Saturday, July 1, 2017, while Juan's wife was away, he contacted Rosalia to discuss their meeting. As previously mentioned, He and she had multiple phone calls that day, with the last call initiated by Juan. This call lasted no more than 30 seconds, but it was enough for he to specify the exact time and place for their meeting. It is believed that when he met she, he used force to make her get into his car and turned off her mobile phone. From that moment on, her phone no longer had a signal. According to the timeline created by the prosecutors, Juan drove towards the municipality of Landry. At some point during the drive, he allegedly struck Rosalia on the head, leading to her death. He then drove a few more kilometers to a stream to dispose of her body. During the hearing, the prosecutor presented all the evidence related to the case. In addition to the report from the experts of the Institute of Forensic Medicine, the prosecution had witness testimony, autopsy reports, DNA analysis results, and forensic reports. The case documents include information from telephone company, such as call records, text messages, and geolocation information. This information fully corroborates the main version of the prosecution. Additionally, the prosecutor's team had testimony from Juan's 20-year-old stepdaughter, Macarena. She said that Juan left home around 9 p.m. that night, and she did not see him return. This contradicts Juan's testimony, which states that on the day of the incident, he went to bed early and did not leave the house. Another piece of indirect evidence presented by the prosecution was related to Juan's inappropriate behavior towards teenage girls. This evidence was based on the testimony of a female student. She reported that he had subjected her to indecent acts when she was just 12 years old. Additionally, there was other evidence that Juan had problems at the school, where he occasionally taught, all related to his relationships with minors. In November 2019, Rosalia's family changed their lawyer. By March 2020, their new lawyer, Caroline Walker, stated that after reviewing the case documents, she discovered that the investigation had overlooked several important elements. Curiously, Juan was not prosecuted for sexually assaulting Rosalia, even though their romantic relationship started long before she turned 18. Caroline also realized that as she gathered evidence against Juan, he was clearly a dangerous predator. For this reason, she did not rule out the possibility of future cases related to these crimes. The main trial took place at the Vera Municipal Court on Tuesday, July 7, 2020. This was 3 years after the disappearance and 2 years after the discovery of Rosalia's remains. Only the main representatives of the parties attended the trial. Other members, journalists, and many experts were in other rooms of the court. Given the case's significance and the announced restrictions, various feminist groups supporting Rosalia's family requested authorities to broadcast the trial daily. In his opening speech, Prosecutor Gustavo stated that he would seek a life sentence for Juan. There were several reasons for this decision, the most important of which was that Rosalia had been in an unequal relationship with him. Juan not only controlled her, but also dominated her in social relationships. Furthermore, he has consistently failed to acknowledge their common child, Alma. Therefore, the punishment Gustavo proposed, that is, life imprisonment, was entirely appropriate to the extent of the damage Juan had caused to all members of Rosalia's family. Caroline Walker, the lawyer representing Rosalia's family, criticized the authorities for their initial response when Rosalia was reported missing. She noted that the authorities were initially not proactive in searching for Rosalia and did not take the case seriously. Additionally, she stressed that Rosalia's remains were not discovered by law enforcement officers, but were found by 2 hunters. She also said that in her opinion, a police officer informed Juan about the investigation. This led to some important information being leaked, which could have helped him disappear just before his arrest. The trial lasted about a month and featured around 100 expert testimonies. Details of the phone calls between Rosalia and Juan on the day of her disappearance were also presented. It was revealed that he made the last call shortly after she left the bar, and her phone was turned off soon after. Several witnesses reported seeing a similar white car near the bar that evening. Juan was also seen leaving the house around 9:00 p.m., and a while later he came back. Prosecutors argued that this brief time frame was sufficient for him to commit the crime and dispose of the evidence. Additionally, another important piece of evidence was geolocation data from the phones, which showed that Juan and Rosalia's phones were in close proximity for a period of time. The prosecution delivered a strong closing argument, presenting both direct and indirect evidence that confirmed Juan Valdez's guilt in the crime. They firmly believed that Rosalia's life was ended due to a violent act by he, although the exact cause of death was not determined. But forensic experts believed that she could have died from a severe blow to the left cheekbone. Juan also had the opportunity to defend himself. He attempted to dispute all the evidence presented by the authorities, particularly denying allegations that he intentionally damaged his mobile phone. Furthermore, Juan argued that the authorities had made a serious mistake by focusing on him, which had led to a failure to identify who had actually harmed Rosalia. On August 3, 2020, the much-awaited verdict was announced. The court found Juan Oscar Valdez guilty on all charges. He listened to his sentence with his eyes downcast. Outside the courtroom, many young people from various human rights organizations had gathered to show support for Rosalia's family and to follow the trial's progress. Shortly after the guilty verdict, Juan's lawyer filed an appeal against the trial court's decision. During the appeal, Juan's lawyer argued that the prosecution had not presented clear evidence to prove that Rosalia had actually gotten into Juan's car on the day she disappeared. Additionally, the lawyer also argued that Aldo, her last boyfriend, whom she had accused of sexual assault, was the one people should suspect. The defense also stressed that the fact that Juan had a daughter with Rosalia did not prove that he had a motive to commit a serious crime. The prosecution aimed to counter the arguments made by Juan's lawyer. They said that from the beginning of the investigation, they considered many theories, but all were discarded when the evidence pointed to Juan as the perpetrator. Caroline Walker, the lawyer representing Rosalia's family, agreed with the prosecution's position. On October 7, 2021, the Vera Court of Appeals issued a unanimous 3-judge decision. They did not accept the appeal and request to overturn the sentence that Juan's lawyer had filed. Therefore, the previous judgment of the trial court, according to which Juan was sentenced to life in prison, remained in place. In addition, the prosecutor's office was asked to conduct an internal investigation into the misconduct of some of the police officers involved. Rosalia's case became a symbol of solidarity and feminist movements in the northern province of Santa Fe. It highlighted the issue of gender violence in local media and sparked discussions during political debates. Although Rosalia's family achieved justice, it did not erase their pain. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Megan Emirowicz. A young girl's 18th birthday celebration turned into a nightmare. We'll find out in today's video. It took Conrad Emirowicz and Julia years to conceive. After unsuccessful attempts to conceive, they sought help at a specialist clinic. Medical professionals ran tests and determined that the couple would never be able to have biological children. The news devastated Conrad, 40, and his 31-year-old wife, Julia, who had always dreamed of a large family. However, they eventually accepted their situation. At that time, they had been married for over 2 years. In 2002, they adopted a baby girl named Megan. Just 3 days after her birth, she was taken away from her biological mother, who was struggling with addiction. Megan was placed in a more stable environment. A few months after adopting 2 children, Julia was surprised to discover that she was pregnant. They considered it a miracle and believed that the child was a blessing from God for their good deeds. Their 3rd child, Morgan, was also their only biological child. Although only one of their 3 children was biological, They loved them all equally. With 3 young children, the couple experienced the challenges of caring for newborns, including the constant need to change diapers. This made them consider starting their own business, as they realized how expensive disposable diapers could be. They created soft cloth diapers. The diapers were highly absorbent, and while Julia made them at home, Conrad worked on marketing the product. Their diapers became quite popular. Conrad worked in information technology at a local IT company. 3 years later, Julia became pregnant again and gave birth to a baby girl named Anne. It turned out that the doctors had made a mistake, and they were able to have a baby after all. During this time, the family lived in Rowland Township, Michigan, a peaceful and cozy area, away from the hustle and bustle of big cities. Conrad began drinking heavily. This put a strain on their relationship, leading to frequent arguments. Finally, in 2011, Julia decided to file for divorce. After the divorce, the couple shared joint custody for the first few years, but the children lived primarily with their mother. When the older children, Austin and Megan, became teenagers, their parents suggested that they choose which parent they wanted to live with. Their mother was quite strict, while their father was more lenient and allowed them to attend parties and invite friends over. Additionally, his new home had more space, so Austin and Megan decided to live with him, thinking they would have more freedom. At first, everything seemed great. The teenagers felt like they were enjoying their newfound freedom. Conrad struggled with his alcoholism and never overcame it. Over time, he drank more heavily and neglected household chores such as cleaning and chores. As a result, the house and yard became increasingly messy. What had once been a comfortable place became an unsuitable environment for the children. Morgan and Anne, who lived with their mother, stopped visiting their father altogether because they were embarrassed to discuss him and did not want to bring friends over. Meanwhile, the eldest son, Austin, began to argue more frequently with Conrad. Austin was frustrated with his father's behavior, but felt powerless to change it. As his resentment grew, it turned into anger, and he even resorted to physical violence when confronting Conrad. One notable incident occurred at a friend's birthday party of Austin's. Conrad arrived drunk and disheveled, which Austin found embarrassing. On another occasion, Conrad attended Austin's graduation drunk and slurring his words. That night, Austin even noticed a foul odor coming from his father. Before he turned 18, Austin began looking for a job so he could move out. He saved enough money to live with friends, which helped him escape the toxic environment at home. As a result, he almost stopped communicating with the rest of his family. Meanwhile, Megan, who chose to live with her father Conrad, was left to do most of the household chores, including laundry, cooking, cleaning, and making sure her father stayed out of trouble. This pressure may have contributed to her developing behavioral problems, which friends and family eventually noticed. Megan began to harbor resentment toward her father, especially after he threatened a teacher with a knife, which led to her being expelled from school. As a result, her father arranged for her to be homeschooled. For reasons unknown, Megan also did not seek help from her mother and had no intention of moving in with her. One day, Conrad was too drunk to take Megan on a business trip, so she took his car without permission and drove away. Unfortunately, Megan got into an accident and crashed the car, but she suffered minimal legal consequences. Meanwhile, Conrad's alcoholism worsened. The family's difficulties left Megan shouldering all the household chores. She was overwhelmed by the myriad of problems, and chaos in the house continued to escalate. One day, Julia came to help clean. However, it took her about 10 hours to clean just one room. When she went down to the basement, she was overwhelmed by the smell of cat urine. She suggested to Megan that they move in together to escape the hardships of living with Conrad, an alcoholic father, but Megan refused. She chose to continue supporting her father, and by 2020, the situation became completely dire. Trash filled the yard, and the house was a mess. During this time, Megan was Conrad's only source of support. Since 2021, he had been experiencing health issues due to long-term alcohol abuse. He would occasionally lose consciousness and have trouble controlling his bladder. Megan stayed close to her father. She felt that she couldn't leave him because she feared he wouldn't survive without her. Despite his drinking, but Conrad was never aggressive. He was actually a nice guy. They would argue, but their conflicts were usually just minor verbal disagreements. In the fall of 2021, Megan is planning to celebrate her 18th birthday. Although her birthday is September 29, she decides to have the party on October 1 after school so all her friends can attend. Conrad agreed to pay for the hotel room for the event, even though he initially objected. On the morning of the holiday, her father, Conrad, was supposed to take her to the hairdresser. However, when Megan woke up, she found him asleep on the couch in the living room. Conrad was drunk and did not respond to her attempts to wake him. Frustrated, Megan yelled that he had disappointed her, to which her father responded with a yell, then rolled over and went back to sleep. Megan became extremely angry and started throwing objects at Conrad. Then she asked a friend to take her to the hair salon. She also took a tearful photo and posted it on social media to express her frustration with the situation. The next morning, Megan took out her dad's bank card, but it wouldn't work when she tried to make a payment. She assumed she had entered the wrong PIN. She tried calling Conrad, but he didn't answer. So she asked her friend Kayla, who lived nearby, to stop by her house and ask Conrad for the PIN. Kayla arrived around 4 p.m. When she walked into the house and greeted Conrad from a distance, she was shocked to see him up close. He was alive, but his body was covered in grotesque sores. His fingers looked burned, and his legs had a greenish tint. Despite his condition, Conrad provided her with the PIN code for his card. Kayla then called Megan to inform her of the situation. Kayla was surprised that Megan heard the situation and remained calm. Megan advised her to ignore her drunken father. Kayla then called Austin, who came to help, and asked Kayla to report what she saw to the police. She called 911 and waited in the driveway for the ambulance. Kayla spent 15 minutes talking to Megan, but Megan did not seem to understand the severity of the situation. The ambulance arrived very quickly, and they took Conrad out of the house. At that moment, Austin arrived with his friend Lucas. Austin asked his father what happened, and his father assured him that everything was fine. When the two young men entered the house, they discovered blood and a white powder on the sofa where their father was lying. Nearby, there was an open bottle of chemicals. It appeared that the powder on their father's body came from this bottle of chemicals. Conrad recalled that his injuries may have been related to Megan throwing several objects at him before she left. However, Megan was not concerned about her father's health. She continued to call Conrad several times, trying to get his PIN, but received no response. Although she had paid for his beauty services, her frustration increased when she still could not reach him. Megan did not understand that her father was facing serious health problems and had been hospitalized. When her friend informed her of this, she misunderstood the situation and thought he was simply drunk. By this point, doctors had assessed Conrad's condition and discovered he had suffered severe chemical burns. Unfortunately, the hospital did not have the equipment necessary to treat such serious injuries, so they considered transferring him to a better-equipped facility. Austin called his mother and asked her to check Conrad's house again, as he needed to stay in the hospital. When Julia arrived, she was once again shocked by the state of the house while searching for a cell phone. During this time, the doctors ran some tests. They found that his blood alcohol level was very high. Despite being in the hospital for a long time, Conrad was still very drunk. It is difficult to imagine what his blood alcohol level was the morning he spoke to Megan. He explained the situation, but did not remember anything and gave inconsistent statements. Before Conrad was taken to the new hospital, 3 police officers spoke with him. They gathered all the information they had, including the suspicion that Megan had used a white powder to intentionally harm her father. While one officer stayed behind to talk to Conrad, the other officers went to look for Megan. Julie informed the officers of the location where Megan was supposed to be celebrating her birthday, and several officers went there. Around 12:15, police spotted a car with several teenagers inside, including Megan. They took her out of the car to ask her some questions about the incident. During questioning, Megan hesitantly confessed that she may have thrown some chemicals at her father. She suggested that she may have accidentally thrown water, which then caused a chemical reaction. As a result, the police had to arrest her and take her to the police station. Conrad allowed police to search his home, where they discovered a bottle of white powder, a highly alkaline product used to clear particularly stubborn blockages. Megan was charged with assault with intent to cause serious bodily injury and 1 count of domestic violence. She was released on $75,000 bail, but she was unable to pay it and remains in jail. Meanwhile, Conrad is in pain in the hospital, and surgeons consider his condition to be serious. They need to treat multiple wounds and remove dead tissue to make way for new skin. Conrad underwent multiple surgeries and suffered from several infections. He also had difficulty speaking, which required a tracheotomy. This was due to his long-term exposure to chemical fumes, which damaged his lungs. He also required dialysis, and his condition continued to deteriorate rapidly. As a result, doctors decided that amputation was necessary. At this point, the Conrad had been suffering for over 5 months, and doctors still couldn't find an effective treatment. Conrad's mental state worsened, and he often requested to be taken off life support to alleviate his pain. More than anything, he wanted to go home. He was eventually discharged and allowed to return home, where some relatives visited him. Unfortunately, just 3 days after coming home, he died due to complications, which occurred on March 6, 2022. Forensic experts determined that his death was caused by poisoning from chemical reagents that harmed his lungs and kidneys. As a result, the charges against Megan were upgraded to murder. She was also charged with the negligent handling of hazardous chemicals that led to his death. The Megan spent nearly 15 months in prison before her trial started. The first hearing took place on June 12, 2023. During the trial, relatives and friends of the Conrad shared their testimonies. Their accounts were similar, which reinforced the credibility of the events being reconstructed. They expressed their belief that Megan did not intentionally kill her father. They emphasized that Megan loved her alcoholic father, Conrad, and took care of him. However, that day, in a fit of anger that he might ruin her birthday, she threw things at him without realizing exactly what she was throwing or the potential consequences of her actions. The prosecution has a different view of the situation. They believe that Megan intentionally collected the chemicals with the intention of harming her father. They argue that this was premeditated rather than impulsive. The prosecution questioned how the Megan could have randomly found the chemicals and water that led to such a reaction. The prosecution believes that Megan poured out the reagents and then added water, which caused the chemical reaction. Megan's defense attorneys countered the allegations. They argued that Conrad was on the wet couch due to a urinary problem and that Megan did not need to throw water at him. They suggested that she may not have even done that, as she seemed uncertain when speaking to the police. They also argued that the chemical could have been thrown accidentally, and that Conrad's burns could have been caused by lying on the wet couch. A major problem arose during the trial. When the police initially found a bottle of chemicals, they did not collect fingerprints from the bottle as evidence. This mistake left a significant gap in the evidence, making it difficult for the prosecutor's office to prove exactly what Megan threw at Conrad. It is possible that the chemical was there by accident and not due to any wrongdoing on her part. Additionally, the burns on the Conrad's skin suggested that the alkali was actually rubbed into it. If Megan had done this, she would have been injured as well, but there were no gloves or protective equipment found in the house, and her hands showed no signs of burns. Alkali practically does not react with cold water at room temperature. It takes a long time for it to begin to damage the skin, and only with hot water does it react almost immediately. According to the lawyers, everything indicates that the Megan must have deliberately poured hot water into the bottle and thrown it at her father. However, all the circumstances of the case indicate the opposite, which means that she did not harm her father. After Megan left, there was serious consideration that someone else might have caused Conrad severe injuries. Suspicion fell particularly on Austin due to his odd behavior on the day of the incident and his strained relationship with his father and other family members. On July 15, 2023, a jury found Megan Emirowicz guilty, but the final decision rested with the judge, who scheduled a verdict hearing in 10 days. The verdict was controversial. Some believe that Megan intentionally killed her father, while others believe it was a coincidence. Megan herself claimed that she had no idea that mixing certain chemicals with water could lead to someone's death. On July 25, 2023, during a heartfelt speech in her defense, Megan apologized, expressed her longing for her father, and insisted that she never intended to hurt him. Megan admitted that she was unclear about what she had thrown at him. She requested the judge's understanding and support to help her pursue her dreams, which include earning a degree in marine biology and developing programs to assist children with depression, aiming to make a positive impact in the world. The Megan asserted that she does not pose a threat to society. The judge decided to give 15-year-old Megan another chance by sentencing her to just 1 year in prison and 5 years of probation. Megan and her lawyers were pleasantly surprised by this lenient sentence. Her mother and sisters supported her, believing she would start serving her sentence right away. However, she was released because she had already spent more time in jail than her sentence required. The prosecutor's office was unhappy with the verdict and requested that Megan be placed under house arrest, but the court denied this request, allowing her to move freely without any GPS monitoring. Hi everyone. Thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Veronica Youngblood. 30 years old, Veronica Youngblood originally came from Argentina. The exact timing of her move to the United States is unclear, but she grew up in poverty. At the young age of 16, she gave birth to her first daughter, Sharon. At that time, she started working as a call girl to support herself and earn money. In 2007, she met Ronald Youngblood, a pilot in the U.S. Navy, who was one of her clients. They quickly started dating, and in 2009, they got married in Las Vegas. Marrying Ronald brought stability to Veronica's life, offering her a home, a supportive husband, and assistance in caring for her daughter. A few years later, in 2012, Veronica and Ronald welcomed a daughter together named Brooklyn. Sharon is described as a sweet and kind girl who is always willing to help others. She is currently in 10th grade at Octina High School and participates in figure skating. Coach Lynette Carroll, who has coached she for about 4 years, commented that she is a persistent and hardworking athlete who has performed well in competitions. Sharon was a good student with a bright future ahead of her. She often talks about her dream of becoming a singer and has a great group of friends, which makes her popular. Brooklyn, 5, is a smart, loving little girl who loves animals. She is adored by her family. However, the relationship between her parents, Veronica and Ronald, is strained. They often argued, which prompted the police to intervene. In 2014, while Ronald and his family were in Honduras, she called the local police to report that she and Ronald had a disagreement, during which he became physically violent. During this time, the family said Ronald began to suspect Veronica of having an affair. After that, their relationship deteriorated, and some people said he became more domineering, jealous, and possessive. They said that while in Honduras, he began denying his wife access to transportation, money, and even the internet. At one point, Veronica sought assistance from the U.S. Embassy to facilitate her emergency return to the United States, which was granted. After their time in Honduras, Ronald was assigned to the Navy Department in Washington, D.C., and they moved to Florida. There, they effectively separated, but continued to live together. Following their time in Florida, they relocated with their children to Oakton, Virginia, and began divorce proceedings. They continued to live in the same house though, possibly because they wanted to raise their 2 daughters together and because Veronica was unemployed, so could not afford to live independently. However, the divorce proceedings and child custody battle put further strain on their relationship. During this process, Veronica applied for student loans and named Ronald as a guarantor without his consent. This led to a number of disputes. By September 2016, the court decided that they could continue living together in Oakton and have joint custody of their daughter Brooklyn, without either party having to pay alimony. In October 2016, Ronald filed for a protective order to protect himself from Veronica. He alleged that she took his phone and threw it in the toilet, poured water on his laptop, and scratched his car. As a result, the court ordered she to move out of their shared home and maintain a distance of 500 feet from Ronald and Brooklyn until a hearing, scheduled for 2 weeks later. The hearing was finalized on October 31, 2016, and the divorce was finalized. After the hearing, Veronica most likely moved back into the marital home because she and Ronald began living together again. Everything went smoothly until March 2018, when Ronald and Veronica failed to appear in court. They filed a joint consent form for a 14 years project that stated they both wanted to move to Sedalia, Missouri, with their 2 daughters, Sharon and Brooklyn, in August 2018. They chose Missouri because that's where most of Ronald's family lives. The agreement that the two signed and filed with the court stated that Veronica would be given her own apartment, 30 miles away from Ronald's home, and that he would be responsible for paying rent for the next 3 years. During this period, they would share joint custody of their daughter, Brooklyn. The court approved this arrangement, and the move was planned. However, on April 13, 2018, she changed her mind about moving, hired a new lawyer, and sought to change the custody agreement. She explained that her situation had changed since the initial agreement was filed. Veronica said she had gotten a good-paying job and would work full-time, but to do this, she needed to stay in Virginia. She also said that she was in the process of buying her own home so that she could live independently of Ronald without his support. In her revised request, she sought full custody of Brooklyn, with the intention of letting their daughter live with her. The dispute between Ronald and Veronica was adjudicated in July 2018. The decision was made that there was no change. Both parties still had to move to Missouri as previously agreed. By August 2018, the judge refused to change the decision, and both parties signed this document to agree. 10 days later, Ronald notified the court of his new address in Missouri, where he planned to move in mid-August 2018. Sadly, this move would never take place. On August 5, 2018, 911 operator Jennifer Hoffman received a call from a 15-year-old girl who was crying out in pain. Sharon pleaded for help, saying she has just been attacked. When Jennifer asked who attacked her, she responded, "Her mother, Veronica." Sharon said her mother came into room while she and her younger sister, Brooklyn, were sleeping. Her mother said she was going to take her to God, then attacked her. Jennifer tried to reassure Sharon, informing her that help was on the way and to stay calm. However, Jennifer then heard the girl screaming and moaning in pain, repeatedly pleading. She said she didn't want to die. Please help her. Finally, in the evening, the rescue team arrived at the apartment on Lincoln Street. They found Sharon alive, with 2 wounds, one in the back and one in the chest. Tragically, her little sister Brooklyn was discovered dead in her bed, due to injury to the head. Sharon was still alive at the time, but in critical condition. She was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, she did not survive. She fought bravely, but died just a few days later. When police arrived at the scene, they did not find Ronald or Veronica. Later that evening, they located Veronica. She went to a friend's house and knocked on the door, with a gun in her hand. Her friend called 911, leading to her swift detention. Upon her arrest, officers discovered she still had the gun with her and was driving a rental car. The police also found 2 ammunition magazines for the weapon. During her interrogation just a few hours later, Veronica confessed that she had bought the gun with plans to kill her daughters, Ronald and Veronica. Then she will die too. She mentioned that she was unhappy with her life, but did not elaborate further. The police later learned that immediately after the shootings, she called Ronald to inform him that she had killed their daughters, and she intended to die as well, adding that she hated him. During the police interrogation, Veronica confessed to her guilt. When the investigator asked what punishment she thought she deserved, she stated it should be the death penalty. Although Virginia has abolished the death penalty, the officers present during the interrogation noted that she spoke in a flat, emotionless manner throughout. As a result, she was charged with first-degree murder for the deaths of her 2 children. At her initial court hearing, she indicated that she did not require a public defender and did not want to hire a private attorney. However, eventually, she hired a lawyer. And at her plea hearing, she pleaded guilty, citing insanity. Veronica delayed each court hearing in her case. The next hearing was pushed back for several months because she repeatedly refused to leave prison to attend. Ultimately, the murder trial began in March 2023. Recently, the prosecution argued that she was not insane. Instead, they claimed she had carefully planned the murders of her daughters, Sharon and Brooklyn, as revenge against her ex-husband, Ronald. The murder occurred just days before Brooklyn and Ronald moved to Missouri. Veronica had just gone through a difficult divorce and was trying to get revenge. The prosecution presented a detailed timeline, demonstrating the premeditation behind the crimes. 9 days before the murders, Veronica attended a local gun show and purchased a gun. Prosecutors allege she did this with the intention of killing both her daughters, Sharon and Brooklyn. On the day before the shootings, Sharon asked Veronica if her mother had planned to kill her and Brooklyn, and if so, that would be horrible. The prosecution contended that Veronica had been plotting the murders for several days. On the day of the crime, they claimed she gave both children chewing gum laced with sleeping pills to incapacitate them. She then went into each room and attacked each of his daughters. During the investigation, it was discovered that Veronica had attacked Brooklyn in the head, causing her instant death. For Sharon, after the first attack, little girl woke up and started screaming. She asked her mother why she had shot her, and her mother replied that little girl was going to see God. Veronica then struck her again in the chest and left the apartment. Finally, Veronica called Ronald and left a voice message saying, "She killed Brooklyn, she killed Sharon, and she will die. She hates him. Goodbye." The prosecution alleged that Veronica was a liar and a manipulator. They said she caused chaos and shirked responsibility for her own gain. They described her as cruel, selfish, vengeful, and calculating. They claimed that she planned and executed the murder plot to get revenge on her ex-husband, Ronald. The defense, on the other hand, argued that she was suffering from psychological problems. They said she had been abused by a cruel man who had physically and mentally abused her. The defense claimed that Ronald never loved her and that she had suffered abuse since childhood. The lawyers again pointed to the poverty that Veronica and her younger sister lived in. They said she had suffered abuse from her grandfather and daily beatings from her parents, to the point where she was at one point unable to walk. Her father would often beat her with tree branches, belts, and brooms. After years of living in such cruel conditions, Her parents abandoned she and her younger sister without a word, leaving them to fend for themselves. Then, Veronica was forced to turn to sex work to provide for her daughter and support her sister. During the proceedings, her younger sister gave a statement in which mentions that since childhood, she has followed a South American religion called Umbanda. This religion believes in the existence of a supreme creator, the ability to communicate with the spirits of the dead, and the concept of reincarnation, spiritual growth through various practices. The defense used this information to argue that Veronica believed she had the ability to communicate with the dead. The defense argued that Veronica had suffered abuse and neglect in her past, and that in addition to these factors, she suffered from severe mental illness. She reported having heard voices throughout her life. At trial, she claimed that she had heard voices that night, leading her to believe that she had to kill her daughters. The defense argued that she suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. They asserted that she was terrified that her children would experience the same abuse she endured as a child if they were separated from her. Veronica's defense team said she went to the police and asked for the death penalty. This shows that she intends to die. During the trial, various witnesses, including doctors who attempted to save Sharon's life and people who knew Veronica, Ronald during their marriage, provided testimony. One of the witnesses was Manuel, a defense attorney, who met Veronica by chance at the time of the incident. He shared that they met in the summer of 2018, and when they first met, she seemed calm and composed. However, by the end of July, things had changed. Manuel said that in late July, Veronica shared with him that she had lost her nursing job, which would have prevented her from moving to Missouri, as she had said in court. During their conversations, she expressed a desire for a more serious relationship, but he responded that he was not ready for a serious relationship. Therefore, the two decided to end their relationship at that time. A few days later, she sent him a text claiming she was pregnant with his child. On July 31st, he visited her home to discuss the pregnancy. Upon arrival, he noticed the apartment was dark, lit only by candles, which created a romantic atmosphere. Although they talked, but he soon left because he felt unsafe. He said that after that conversation, he no longer trusted Veronica's word about her pregnancy. He didn't believe anything she said. It is highly unlikely that she was pregnant, as there were no reports from the prison indicating that she had given birth or experienced a miscarriage. After their conversation, Manuel instructed his lawyer to send Veronica a letter, telling her not to contact him again. He mentioned that he saw she again on August 5, when she appeared at his doorstep. She was calm and seemed cold, asking to come in. However, he refused to open the door and asked her to leave. Veronica advised Manuel to call the police, as they were looking for her. When he inquired why the police were looking for her, she revealed, because she just killed her daughters. At that point, she pulled a gun from her belt and explained her actions to him. Following this, he called 911 to report her location. During the trial, the focus turned to Sharon's 911 call, in which little girl told the dispatcher that she was dying because her mother had just attacked her. At that moment, Veronica stood up and cried out. Veronica couldn't take it anymore. The judge decided to adjourn the trial and informed the jury that Veronica had asked for a waiver because she had interrupted the hearing. Veronica then testified, with tears streaming down her face, about the trauma she had endured. The jury and several others in attendance were moved to tears as she shared the horrors of her life. Ronald attended the trial. He also took the stand to speak about how wonderful his daughters, Sharon and Brooklyn, were, expressing his deep love for them and his devastation over the incident. The prosecution's strong arguments convinced the jury to find Veronica guilty. She purchased the gun 9 days before the murder and had given her daughters sleeping medication beforehand, leaving them defenseless. This clearly indicated that she had planned the act well in advance. It was not a spontaneous decision made in a moment of madness. On the final day, she followed through with her plan. reinforcing that this was not an impulsive act. Veronica claimed that she was mentally ill and did not intend to commit the crime. She had endured abuse throughout her life, which contributed to her mental health struggles. She believed that her actions were meant to protect her daughters from the same abuse she experienced as a child. After a 2-week trial, the jury began their deliberations and returned the next day with a verdict. They determined that Veronica was not insane at the time of the crime and found her guilty of first-degree murder for the deaths of Brooklyn and Sharon, as well as for using a firearm during the commission of the crime. During the sentencing phase, the jury decided that prison was the appropriate consequence for Veronica. Upon hearing her sentence, Veronica reacted with anger, shouting, "No, no," and leaping from her chair. Court officials had to escort her out of the courtroom. Then, she was taken back to prison under special surveillance. A few days later, the jury returned to impose a sentence of 36 years in prison for each murder and an additional 3 years for each firearm offense. In total, Veronica will serve 78 years in prison. Throughout their relationship, Ronald and Veronica both caused each other harm. She may have had some psychological issues, believing that harming her daughters would get back at her ex-husband, Ronald. However, he is not without fault either, and many of Veronica's past experiences likely shaped her personality and her relationship with he. If Veronica feared her daughters would suffer the same abuse she endured as a child, it's important to note that she had full custody of Sharon, and only Brooklyn had to leave. She needed to move to Missouri, a plan she had agreed upon with Ronald. If she had followed through with this move, Brooklyn would not have been so far away from her. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case, the case of Peter Vlasiuk. There are cases that shock the public, not only because of their brutality, but also due to the elaborate plots to conceal the truth. The story of Peter Vlasiuk and the mysterious death of his wife, Patty Vlasiuk, is one of those cases. What began as a reported truck accident gradually revealed suspicious clues that could not be ignored. This case serves as a lesson about trust and conflicts in close relationships. So, how does this story unfold? Let's watch today's video together. Patty Vlasiuk, also known as Patricia Vlasiuk, was born on February 19, 1967, in this hit England. Later, her family moved to the city of Strong, New York State. She grew up and became a certified nurse, working in a hospital. Peter Vlasiuk was born on February 9, 1969, in New Jersey. After school, he went to the army and later worked as a truck driver, in which he transported new cars. When Peter was visiting relatives in Sydney, he met Patty. He moved to this area, and the couple eloped to Las Vegas in 1996. Peter got married to Patty, who at that time was already a mother from a previous marriage. The Vlasiuk family had 3 daughters, Ashley, Jolene, and Rebecca. In 1997, they bought a house with a swimming pool and opened their family business, Bar Angel. Peter worked enthusiastically on the design of the establishment, creating a dance floor with wood and a stage on which various musical groups performed. Things in the family were going well. The bar was very popular with local residents. Peter loved to flirt with visitors to the bar, and there were rumors that he had affairs on the side. Peter loved to give gifts to please Patty, and on her 35th birthday, he gave her a new ultra-modern stethoscope and tonometer, arranging a great party. On April 3, 2002, he went to the bar in his pickup. In the evening, he came home and started waiting for his wife, thinking that she had picked up the children after work. When she did not call him around 20:30, he began to worry and asked if she knew where the children was. Soon after that, Patty arrived home without the children. Peter asked her why she didn't pick up the kids, and they argued because Patty thought he would pick them up. While driving the pickup and smoking, Patty, for a second, tried to shake off the ashes of a cigarette when a deer came out onto the road. She sharply turned the wheel to avoid a collision, and the car fell into the lake. Peter was able to open his passenger door and get out of the sinking car. He tried to pull his wife out but couldn't. The water was very cold, and he got out of the water faster. The man ran for help to the nearest houses, knocking on doors, but no one opened. Finally, in one house, Jessica Becker and Thomas, Peter's friend, opened the door. Thomas called 911 while waiting for rescuers. Later, they arrived at the lake where a white pickup truck was visible about 10 meters from the shore. Thomas put on a wetsuit and fins and dived under the water to the car, but didn't find Patty. The rescuers who arrived with a team of scuba divers pulled her out of the cold lake and found her face down, 2 meters from the car, which was submerged in 4 meters of water. She was taken to the same hospital where she had worked for 17 years, but died shortly after her arrival. Peter was also taken to the hospital by ambulance, where he was warmed up and changed into dry clothes. During the interrogation, Peter told the story about the deer and added that Patty liked to drink, which was true. Patty had several violations for drunk driving, but that night when she died, the alcohol content was insignificant, as shown by the toxicological examination. The investigators checked Peter's story and noticed that there were no skid marks on the road and that the car fell exactly in that place of the road where there was no fence. This was strange. The police also took the pickup truck out of the lake, and experts began to study its door, which Peter said opened in the water. The door was closed from the inside, which meant he could not have opened it. Later, he began to claim that he climbed out through the window. It was also strange that there was a burdock found in Patty's hair that did not grow near the lake. According to Peter, she would return to work, and they immediately pick up the kids. She did not lie on the ground and did not walk so that the thorns of the burdock would cling. The investigators visited Vlasiuk's house and discovered some plants nearby. They found a burdock plant with a broken branch and strands of hair. Peter's boots were covered in several thorns. Divers searched the lakebed for burdock but could not locate any. However, they did find Peter's coat submerged in the water, which had repellent on it. Besides, inside one of the pockets, they discovered her driver's license. During lab analysis, more items were uncovered in the pockets, including a toolbox that had been found at the bottom of the lake but had not been opened. Patty had bruises and wounds on her body, including her neck, but the pathologist, James Terzian, determined that drowning was the cause of death. The inconsistencies in the case made investigators uneasy, prompting them to investigate further for clues. They discovered a strange video involving an intimate relationship between 3 people filming their children, husband and wife, Vlasiuk, and Joyce Warden, nanny of their children. Just 9 hours after his wife's death, Peter contacted the insurance company to claim over $150,000 in life insurance payments. This raised the suspicions of the police, leading them to investigate further. As a result, Peter became the primary suspect. Investigators believed that on the night of April 3, 2002, Peter had left their children with a nanny and went to kill Patty near their home. After she had consumed alcohol, he is suspected of killing her, possibly strangling her, as indicated by the petechiae found on her neck, which are small pinpoint hemorrhages. Following the attack, he allegedly dragged her body through the grass, which could explain the burdock stuck in her hair and on his shoes. He then placed her in a truck, drove to the lake, and pushed the vehicle into the water. A new discovery is, Peter wanted Joyce Warden to be his new girlfriend. He sought full custody of their children and aimed to use life insurance money to pay off his debts. The police reached out to the pathologist conducting the autopsy about the burrs found in Patty's hair and coat. This led the pathologist to reconsider the cause of death and conclude that she had been strangled. From the evidence collected, on April 8, 2002, the police arrested Peter and detained him without bail. The trial started a few months later. Joyce Cardozo, Patty's mother, attended every day with her adult children, Lori, and her grandchildren, William. In court, Peter testified that Patty had been singing and drinking. He said that he asked Patty to stop, which made her so angry that she drove off the road into a lake and refused to get out of the sinking car. Peter claimed he mentioned a deer to the police to protect his wife's reputation, worrying that they might take away her nursing license. However, Peter's brother did not confirm that Patty had been drinking, and the prosecution argued that alcohol was not related to the case at all. A toxicology report indicated that there was only a very small amount of alcohol in Patty's system after the accident. The defense argued that burdock could not have become tangled in her hair while she was in the water. The lawyer pointed out that in April, the ground was muddy after the snow had melted, yet Patty had no dirt on her shoes, clothes, or hair. Additionally, there were no indications of a struggle near the pickup. They were simply in the yard by the bushes. Other than some hair on Patty's body, there was no dirt found beneath her fingernails. In reply, the prosecutor argued that the water could have washed away any dirt. In court, Joyce Warden revealed that it was actually Patty who started the group relationship, not Peter, surprising everyone present. She also confessed to having an intimate relationship with Peter, separate from his wife. Peter's mother testified that Peter consumed a significant amount of alcohol and recalled finding 20 large cans of beer near their home one day. Additionally, she noted that Peter quickly contacted the insurance company regarding payment, and she encouraged him to do so because they needed the money. During the trial, Patty's co-workers stated that she was in a good mood when she arrived at work that day. However, in the afternoon, she had an argument with her husband, which left her very upset. Her colleagues suggested that she should divorce him, but Patty insisted that she still loved him. One co-worker claimed that Patty told her Peter had threatened Patty with a gun during the argument. Additionally, a neighbor living near the Guilford Lake, Jessica Becker, testified that when Peter rushed to their house for help, his hair was dry, even though he had supposedly just come out of the water. A regular at the bar also testified in court that Peter once boasted about being able to make murders appear accidental. Marlene Martin, one of the rescuers who responded at the lake, reported that Peter was pretending to have hypothermia on the night of the incident. She noticed he was sitting still until he saw her, after which he started shaking and spoke in a remorseful tone. The medical examiner for the prosecution stated that Patty had no water in her lungs, suggesting that she may have been choked before entering the water. Chief pathologist Safa Naman supported this conclusion. The jury convicted Peter, sentencing him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In the courtroom, many people, including law enforcement officers and Patty's sisters, embraced and shook hands. Patty's mother expressed her disbelief, saying, "I am still in a state of shock. I did not suspect Peter until he was arrested." She struggled to accept the situation. Peter's parents took custody of his children, while Patty's children from her first marriage began living with their mother. Peter filed several appeals. In one interview, he expressed frustration about being unable to obtain justice due to his lack of wealth, in spite of 2 of his appeals were accepted. Peter decided to change his lawyer because he felt the previous one was not effective, and he even hired a private detective. David Burrs, the detective, had 34 years of experience in the police force and understood the system well. He discovered some inaccuracies and irregularities in the police's handling of the case. Burrs believed that 1 or more police officers might have engaged in misconduct or interfered with the investigation. The handwriting in the diary found did not match Patty's, suggesting it was written by someone else. He also realized that some defense witnesses had not been called during the first trial. One of these was forensic pathologist James Terzian, who concluded that the cause of death was drowning. During the second trial, Dr. James Terzian testified for the defense, raising some questions about the case details. In response, the prosecution brought in another pathologist, Michael M. Baden, to support the original findings of the first pathologist. Baden claimed James to have performed thousands of autopsies, including numerous drownings. But James had only handled 2 drowning cases in his career. The lawyers also presented photographs taken near the lake, demonstrating that burdock plants do grow in that area. Despite the jury's divided opinions during deliberations, they ultimately found Peter guilty once more. He received a life sentence, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In September 2011, Peter filed an appeal, claiming that his lawyer was ineffective and pointing out mistakes made by the prosecution. He also requested to change the trial's location to ensure that the new jury would not be aware of his previous convictions, allowing them to be more impartial. However, it was revealed that the last jury was aware of his prior guilty verdicts, which may have influenced their decisions. In December 2011, the appellate court approved Peter's appeal, but the trial venue remained unchanged. In June 2012, the third trial commenced. A private detective had spent 15 years investigating Peter's case and strongly believed in his innocence. Alongside Peter's lawyer, they gathered numerous arguments to support him in court. During this trial, there was a significant clash between the prosecution and the defense. The prosecution argued that if Peter had lied about his wife swerving on the road to avoid a deer, then he must be lying about everything else. In contrast, the defense contended that Peter was trying to protect his wife, as a 6th drunk driving charge could cost her nursing license. The pathologist's third report originally indicated drowning as the cause of death, but was later revised to strangulation after considering the presence of burdock. He noted evidence of lung singeing and observed that there was insufficient water to support drowning. James A., on the other hand, maintains that Patty died of drowning. However, after analyzing the lungs and their weight, James concluded that the water content was inadequate to confirm drowning. The ambulance report stated that during the assistance to Patty, a lot of water was pumped out of her, and in the intensive care unit, it took 45 minutes. The prosecution argued that since there were no burdocks in the lake, it is likely that Patty was killed near her house, where burdocks were present, and then her body was disposed of in the water. In contrast, the defense pointed out that there were no signs of a struggle in the courtyard of Wlasiuk House. Simultaneously, no defensive wounds on Patty, and no dirt or DNA from her husband found under her nails. Furthermore, her white shoes and clothing remained clean, suggesting that water alone could not have washed away any potential dirt. An expert for the prosecution stated that the pickup truck entered the lake slowly, suggesting it was pushed rather than driven off the road quickly, as there were no skid marks present. In response, a defense expert challenged this claim, alleging that the prosecution's experts had made errors and presented photos that showed skid marks on the road. The prosecution maintained that Patty had almost no alcohol in her system, while the defense presented toxicology reports indicating she was intoxicated and had a history of multiple drunk driving offenses. Reply: the prosecution argued that witnesses who came forward claimed Peter's hair was dry while his body was wet, which contradicts earlier statements that he was wet all over. They also pointed out that hair belonging to Patty was found on the burdocks in the yard, indicating that the crime took place there. In response, the defense contended that it is normal for a homeowner's hair to be found in the yard and suggested that the wind could have carried it there, highlighting that there were no signs of a struggle. The prosecution argued that Peter had placed the pickup truck near the recall, while the defense contended that leaving her in such an obvious location was illogical. They claimed that if Peter had intended to harm Patty, he would have been more likely to put her in the cabin and use a seatbelt to pull her to the bottom of the lake. Patty was discovered in the water outside the car, indicating that her husband attempted to rescue her by pulling her out but could not get her to the surface. End of trial. Peter was sentenced to life in prison, but he could be eligible for early release after 25 years. The judge described him as a dangerous individual who poses a threat to society. In 2016, Peter's appeal was rejected, and he continued to serve his sentence. His oldest daughter visited him during this time. The case attracted significant public interest, leading to a group of supporters who believed he was innocent. Heather, a girl, discovered information about Peter while studying criminal law through social media. In 2015, she volunteered to assist him by sending a postcard. Although she worked hard to help him seek justice, all of his subsequent appeals were denied. A year later, Peter and Heather got married in prison. She expressed that their relationship was challenging and not for the faint of heart, but she had faith in him and planned to be with him no matter where he was. The couple believed that there was a conspiracy by law enforcement against Peter, claiming that some water was deliberately removed from the lungs before the autopsy. They think Patty had influential relatives who may have affected the outcome of the case. Her cousin worked in the district attorney's office, and her mother was a senior hospital prosecutor. At that time, the prosecutor needed to secure a conviction to boost their chances in an upcoming election for a judgeship, and this case helped them achieve that goal. Peter and Heather felt that Peter was simply unlucky and a victim of the situation. To support Peter, Heather created a fundraising page and a social media account to raise awareness about the case. Despite her efforts, Peter is still incarcerated at the Coxsackie Correctional Facility. In March 2027, he will be eligible for parole. The tragic case of Patty Wlasiuk is a chilling reminder of the potential darkness that can exist behind closed doors, even in seemingly ordinary lives. The unexpected twists and turns of the investigation, from inconsistencies in Peter's story to the suspicious circumstances surrounding her death, paint a picture of a man willing to go to any lengths to cover up his crimes. Ultimately, Peter's conviction for second-degree murder after a lengthy legal battle brought some justice to Patty's family, although the emotional scars remain. The case not only underscores the importance of a thorough investigation, but also highlights the difficulty of uncovering the truth when the perpetrator is someone close to the victim. Thanks to the persistence of the authorities and the resilience of Patty's family, justice was finally served, bringing closure to a story that might otherwise have faded into darkness. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Heather Rich. We all experience youthful adventures, a rebellious spirit, and the transition into adulthood. However, for some, adolescence can become perilous. In the remote southern region of Oklahoma, USA, lies a quiet town named Waurika. This small community has around 2,000 residents, where everyone knows one another, and life is calm and steady. In the fall of 1996, the Rich family lived in Oklahoma. Mom Gail, Dad Dwayne Rich, and their 4 children, 3 boys, and a girl named Heather. At the time, Heather was a sophomore in high school. She was an excellent student and cheerleader, known for her beauty and ability to attract attention. Heather was kind, but had a rebellious streak in her teenage years. On the evening of October 2, 1996, an argument broke out between Gail and Heather. They discussed a phone bill that cost the family $300, which upset Gail's mother, who disapproved of Heather's spending habits. Dwayne, the father, on the other hand, remained calm about the situation. Gail explained to Heather that due to the family's difficult financial situation, she could not afford to pay the large monthly bills. Dwayne, an electrician, had suffered severe burns from a transformer explosion and required extensive medical care and skin grafts. He was unable to work and support the family, forcing Gail to take on additional work to make ends meet. Every dollar was important, especially since Dwayne was about to undergo expensive surgery. Gail wanted Heather to learn the value of money and the importance of being self-sufficient, but Heather struggled with this, leading to a serious argument between them. After things calmed down, Heather went to bed. She stopped by the living room to say goodnight to her father, but walked past her mother in silence to express her resentment. The next morning, October 3, Gail woke everyone up for breakfast, as was their usual routine. However, Heather did not come down for breakfast. Gail believed that it was because Heather was angry due to the events of the previous night. Gail hoped that when Heather was hungry, she would come down to eat. But after a while, Heather still did not appear. Gail went up to check on her in her room. Gail was surprised to find the room empty. At that time, cell phones were not common, and Heather did not have a phone. Worried, her parents called one of Heather's friends, but no one knew where she was. This behavior was unusual for Heather. She had never run away before and didn't have any mental health issues. She always took care of her appearance and wouldn't leave the house for long without changing clothes or doing her makeup. With all her belongings still at home, worried Gail and Dwayne immediately went to the sheriff's department in Wow to report their daughter missing. Gail explains their argument from the previous day, when Gail expressed her frustration over the large phone bill, which was a significant burden on the family, and Heather appeared stubborn and determined not to admit her mistake. The sheriff tried to reassure the parents by comparing the situation to a typical teenage runaway, especially after an argument with her mother. However, this behavior was unusual for Heather, who usually tried to find a compromise even after a disagreement. The sheriff explained that most runaways returned home after a period of time. They suggested to the parents that Heather might have returned while they were at the sheriff's office. The police told Gail and Dwayne that Heather would need to be missing for at least a day before they could officially declare her missing. Since that time had not passed, the police could not accept their report. Frustrated and worried, Gail and Dwayne believed that something was wrong and that their daughter was in danger. They began searching all over town, starting with Heather's closest friends. One of these friends was Randy Wood, a 17-year-old boy who was the captain of the school's football team. He had dated Heather, but they had quickly broken up and agreed to remain friends. Importantly, he was one of the boys responsible for Heather's large phone bill. When asked about Heather's whereabouts, Randy said that he did not know where Heather was or what had happened to her. Gail then decided to contact another friend of Heather's, a 17-year-old high school student named Joshua Luke Bagwell, whom Heather had just started dating. When Gail called, Joshua's grandmother answered and said that he was resting after a party. She wanted to let him sleep and refused to wake him up to take the call. Joshua's grandmother said she was cleaning out the trailer in their yard where the school children had played the night before. When the mother asked about her daughter's disappearance, she said she didn't know. Relatives then searched the area for any sign of Heather. After a day of unsuccessful searching, her parents returned to the police station, and eventually the police joined the search effort. By October 10, a week after the search began, no useful information about Heather had been found. Given the amount of time that had passed, few people still held out hope of finding her alive. When searchers reached the area near the Texas border, a body was found floating face down, partially submerged in muddy water. Observers from a bridge noticed that the body was covered in mud, making it difficult to see in the murky water, as if someone had deliberately obscured it. When a diver finally recovered the body and brought it to shore, it was observed that the body had been severely mutilated with multiple gunshot wounds. A forensic examination was conducted. Experts later determined that the victim had been shot 9 times at close range. The condition of the body was horrific, with many serious cuts. During this time, There was only one missing person in the area, so Heather's parents were asked to identify the body. They only recognized their daughter through the ring on her finger, an engraved piece of jewelry that her mother had given her. Later, dental records confirmed that it was indeed Heather's body. The news of her death quickly became the talk of the town the next day. Within hours, the entire village knew about the case. Randy Wood also heard the shocking news that same day. It just so happened that Randy had been crowned king of several football seasons that day. It was expected that there would be a big celebration after the game. However, Randy was deeply affected by what had happened to his ex-girlfriend Heather. He then went to the bridge and stared at the spot where Heather's body was found for a long time. In fact, he knew more about the situation than he had shared with Heather's parents. The investigation quickly led the police to Randy and some of his friends. One of them is the son of wealthy parents. The second is the best football player in school and captain of the team. The third is an ambitious criminal from the streets. As soon as the police got involved in the case, they spoke to Heather's parents. By that time, Gail had contacted several of Heather's friends and acquaintances. Gail became suspicious of two young men, Heather's ex-boyfriend, 17-year-old Randy Wood, and her current boyfriend, Joshua Luke Bagwell, who slept after a party and did not answer Gail's phone calls. She believed they were hiding something. These high school students appeared to be reciting rehearsed answers, and when pressed with further questions, they struggled to answer. Their behavior was quite tense. Gail believes that Randy and Joshua have more information than they are admitting. While talking to Heather's classmates and friends, the police have gathered many clues that Joshua and Randy know important details, and they should assist the police in uncovering what happened on that tragic night when Heather left home after an argument with her mother. Heather's best friend told her that Heather was planning to attend a party that night to meet her boyfriend, Joshua. Even though her parents had forbidden her from leaving the house after dark, she decided to sneak out. After her parents fell asleep, she climbed out of the window around 11 p.m. At the party, she was supposed to meet Joshua and Randy. Joshua came from a wealthy family and always arrived in fancy cars and dressed better than his peers. Randy comes from a humble family, but his athletic talents make him as popular as his wealthy friend Joshua. Randy is an attractive young man who is admired for his ability to play football at a professional level. Randy has earned the position of captain of the team through his skills and is recognized as the best player in town. Randy and Joshua are close friends. They often spend weekends driving Joshua's car along country roads. They often hang out with girls and drink frequently and smoke occasionally. There were few places for teenagers to hang out in the city, so they found their own ways to have fun. Heather, along with a friend, experimented with drinking and hanging out with popular boys. The night before she disappeared, she left home to spend time with them. On September 27, 1996, just 5 days before Heather went missing, Heather and another cheerleader were found in the hallway of the stadium with marijuana and smoking paraphernalia. It was also revealed that Heather had been drinking alcohol. As a result, she was suspended from school for 3 days, and her parents learned about this from her teacher. They were upset, as they never expected their 16-year-old daughter to engage in such dangerous behavior. Heather explained that curiosity led her to try these substances. She promised her parents that she would stop. Her parents became increasingly concerned about why she had chosen this path, as she was an excellent student and athlete. Although her parents believed her promise to quit, they found it difficult to confirm whether she was telling the truth. Bad habits may have played a direct role in her death. Police focused on Joshua and Randy to uncover the events at the party before Heather disappeared. Randy said he and Joshua had been in a trailer behind Joshua's house, where they spent the evening playing and drinking. However, both insisted they had not seen Heather that night, which raised the police's suspicions. The two young men told their stories in identical, almost rehearsed ways, they showing little emotion. This behavior led police to suspect that the teens were not telling the truth. At this stage, The police lacked evidence linking Joshua and Randy to the crime. However, their unusual behavior raised suspicions of their involvement. As a result, both young men became prime suspects, prompting a closer look at their backgrounds, their connection to Heather, and the events of that night's party. The autopsy revealed new insights, particularly regarding the number of shots fired at Heather. Remarkably, even police handguns typically only held 8 rounds. This begs the question, why reload the gun to fire another shot when the person was clearly dead? The second notable detail was the type of ammunition used to kill Heather. The killer chose Winchester double-shot. These bullets were quite rare and could only be purchased from one store in the city. Police checked the store's receipts and discovered that just before the murder, only one person had purchased this type of ammunition. The seller identified the buyer as Joshua in photos provided by the police. He came into the store and bought a whole box of 20 bullets. The seller also mentioned that Joshua was with another person. This person was not Randy, but Joshua's close friend, Curtis Allen Gamble, who was known to the police. He had a history of legal trouble, including multiple arrests. Despite his young age, Curtis had spent much of his life in juvenile facilities. He had a troubled past, having been arrested for drunk driving and shooting at animals, and even passers-by. Curtis quickly became the prime suspect, as Joshua and Randy had no previous legal problems and were never considered aggressive or dangerous. On October 23, police went to Curtis's home in another city. Notably, just a short distance from his home was a bridge over the river where Heather's body was discovered. After police arrived and found Curtis was not home, they spoke with his grandmother. She shared information about her grandson and noted that Curtis was very familiar with the area of the neighboring city and frequently visited the bridge where Heather was found. She mentioned that she used to take him fishing at that location when he was a child. The next day, Curtis was arrested and taken to the Orica Sheriff's Office. The interrogation lasted over 8 hours, during which Curtis remained mostly silent but agreed to take a lie detector test. However, the most important information the police learned was that Curtis admitted to owning a Mossberg handgun. This type of handgun can use a special type of bullet. Police suspected that he may have owned the weapon used in the murder. Investigations revealed that Heather had been shot with this rare type of handgun. After they seized the weapon and conducted gun tests, experts confirmed that it was indeed the weapon used to kill Heather. When the police presented evidence linking Curtis to Heather's murder, the investigation took a significant break. Curtis broke down and told the police that his 2 friends, Randy and Joshua, were involved in the murder. Curtis then wrote a 1-page confession. The police were able to identify the killers. Randy and Joshua were then arrested and taken to the sheriff's department. There, the police presented Curtis's confession, in which Curtis was the one who wanted to kill Heather and that he initiated the attack. However, he was not the one who actually carried out the murder. According to Curtis, he gave Joshua his weapon and forced Joshua to shoot Heather. However, the police were skeptical of Curtis's confession, as Joshua did not fit the profile of a criminal. Joshua had no previous problems with the law, was known to be a model student, an excellent athlete, and was generally well-liked. The party took place in southern Oklahoma, while the murder took place in Texas. As a result, they had to appear in court in Texas, where the crime could result in the death penalty. After being pressured by the police, Randy finally spoke during a second interview. However, he denied any involvement in the murder, saying that Curtis committed the crime and that Joshua assisted him. Joshua, meanwhile, chose not to cooperate with the investigation. In October 1996, the police received 2 conflicting confessions. They decided to believe Randy's story, especially since he had passed a lie detector test. According to Randy, he had planned to go out drinking with his friends Curtis and Joshua that night. Randy later learned that Heather was supposed to be joining them. Heather knew Joshua and Randy but had never met Curtis, so she had no idea he could be dangerous. That night, Everyone drank a lot of alcohol, and Heather gradually lost consciousness. In her drunken state, Curtis harassed her and tried to attack her. Although she could barely speak, Curtis was afraid that when she woke up, she would remember what had happened. Knowing that rape was a serious crime that could result in a prison sentence, Curtis suggested that Heather be eliminated to avoid consequences. Randy thought he was joking, but he was serious. Curtis took a handgun from his car and aimed it at everyone present. Joshua and Randy understood the danger they were in, so they chose not to resist. They put the intoxicated Heather in the trunk of Joshua's car and drove towards Curtis's house. Before they arrived, Curtis led them across a bridge where Heather's body was later discovered. Curtis ordered the car to stop in the middle of the bridge and told them to pull Heather out of the trunk and place her near the railing. Fearing for their own safety, Joshua and Randy complied, but Heather was too intoxicated to stand. They left her on the ground. Curtis approached Heather and began shooting at close range. Randy saw a large hole appear in Heather's skull and instinctively covered his eyes, not wanting to see anymore. Curtis unloaded all his bullets on her. Curtis and Joshua then dumped her off the bridge and drove away. Randy said they were horrified by what they had just witnessed and the extent of the cruelty Curtis had inflicted on Heather. They decided to remain silent out of fear for their own lives. In October 1996, Randy Wood, Joshua Luke Bagwell, and Curtis Allen Gamble were charged with the kidnapping and murder of 16-year-old Heather. Of the three, Joshua was the most difficult to deal with because he would not confess, remained silent, and there was virtually no evidence against him. The prosecutor had to rely on the testimony of Randy and Curtis, but their testimony was inconsistent. To resolve this problem, the prosecutor offered Randy a deal. He had to testify against Joshua in exchange for life imprisonment with the possibility of parole in 30 years. Randy quickly accepted the offer. On October 15, Curtis agreed to a plea deal that could have resulted in life imprisonment without parole. However, while in prison awaiting trial, Curtis assaulted a security guard, knocking him down and attempting to choke him before other guards intervened. Nearly a year and a half after Heather's death. In February 1998, Joshua's trial began. The defense made numerous attempts to justify the actions of those involved in the crime. The attorneys sought to discredit Heather by portraying her as an alcoholic and a womanizer, claiming that she had an inappropriate relationship with Curtis and that she had begun to threaten others. They argued that this behavior motivated Curtis to choose to eliminate her. Heather's parents defended their daughter, insisting that Heather was a talented athlete and a good person. She accidentally went with a bad group of friends and met a criminal. The floor was unexpectedly given to Curtis, he reiterating his claim that Joshua had nothing to do with the crime and had no knowledge of the planned murder. He claimed that Randy was the one who shot Heather. In a surprising turn of events, Randy refused to take the plea deal. He did not want his confession to be seen as an attempt to save himself and put others at risk. In court, he stated that he wanted to seek justice for Heather, despite his attorney advising him not to. Although this noble choice put him at risk of the death penalty, it left a strong impression on Heather's parents, who later met with Randy in person to discuss the situation. On February 14, Randy took the stand before the jury, sharing his account of the tragic events of that night, and the jury believed him completely. Randy described how Joshua had participated in Heather's murder along with Curtis, and also detailed Curtis's role in covering up the crime. That day, Curtis was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder, resulting in a sentence of life in prison plus 99 years. On May 8, Heather's and Randy's parents met during a live broadcast. Despite their deep sorrow over their loss, they were struck by the honesty of Randy and the genuine remorse he showed. On August 7, 1998, Randy Wood's trial ended, and he was found guilty of murdering the Heather. receiving a life sentence with the chance of parole after 40 years. Many people were upset by this verdict, as Randy was the only one who demonstrated remorse and risked his own safety to tell the truth. Many felt that he did not deserve such a severe punishment. Joshua was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was placed in the same correctional facility as Curtis. In January 2002, both men made a bold escape at night and evaded capture for 10 days while hiding in Texas, prompting a national alert. Eventually, they were caught and returned to prison. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Eve Stratford. Eve Stratford was born on December 28, 1953, in Dortmund, West Germany, to parents Albert and Liza Stratford. Her mother was German, while her father was a British doctor who met in the 194 Eros. The family traveled the world, eventually settling in Aldershot, a small town in southeast England. Her younger brother was also born there. During her childhood, Eve won 3 beauty contests and dreamed of becoming a model who would feature on a popular magazine cover. In 1972, at the age of 18, Eve met Tony Priest, a young musician and lead singer of a band called Onyx. They believed that moving to London would boost their chances of success. In 1973, Eve, Tony, and 3 other band members relocated to Leighton in East London. They rented a 4-bedroom flat and lived together. Due to their limited finances, they struggled to make ends meet and slept on old mattresses on the floor instead of beds. Eve Stratford had the ambition to succeed in the modeling industry. Shortly after moving to London, she found a job at the Playboy Club in Park Lane, thanks to a friend's recommendation. She quickly became popular with the club's wealthy clientele, which included millionaires, politicians, celebrities, and even individuals in the criminal underworld. She also became a favorite of the club's owner, Victor Oberlans. All the waitresses at the club wore velvet and bow ties to serve the most prestigious guests in London. At work, Eve introduced herself as Eve Von Bach, or Eve Bunny. She proudly shared photos of herself with comedians Eric Morecambe and Sid James, as well as a photo with boxing champion John Conti. She mailed these photos to her parents and felt proud of herself, but she always dreamed of more. In 1975, at the age of 21, Eve applied to be a Playboy cover model, but was rejected. However, fortune smiled upon her when she received an invitation to pose for the cover of Mayfair, Playboy's British rival. Adopting the pseudonym Eve Von Bach, she appeared topless on the cover, and inside the magazine there were 9 pages of interviews with her, along with a large poster of her completely naked. The March 1975 issue of Mayfair sold 460,000 copies, mostly to men. They called Eve the classic blonde. In a 9-page interview, she shared her preferences in love, admitting that she liked being submissive to a strict man. However, she stressed that she did not like being tied down or punished. She enjoyed seducing men and watching their excitement. She admitted that she often flirted and teased men, which made her feel happy. She also said that she liked both men and women. In the interview, she misled readers by saying that she lived alone with a cat, which sometimes made her feel sad and lonely. The nude photo shoot made Eve's boss, Victor Oberlans, very angry. He suspended her from her job as a waitress for 3 months, but she was not too worried about this. She was aware that she had violated her contract by working for Playboy's competitors. In a discussion with her manager, Erin Morris, she confessed that her dream was to become a model and that she was doing everything she could to achieve that goal. She said that she did not want to serve rich men forever and was not afraid of losing her job as a waitress at the Playboy Club. She hoped that her appearance on the cover of Mayfair would lead to new job opportunities and help her advance her career. She believed that in the next 3 months, she would not need to return to the Playboy Club. Eve had no idea what was coming next. By then, her boyfriend, Tony's band, had completely disbanded. Although after moving to London, the group has performed as an opening act for famous bands such as Queen and T-Rex. But then, Tony and a friend, a former band member, had to work as forklift drivers. The other 2 members joined another band and left them. After Eve was suspended from her job, she spent the day in their rented apartment. Soon, she received 2 job offers, one for a photo shoot with a South African magazine and another as a model for a crime fiction magazine cover, in which she played a victim with a knife stuck in her throat. On Tuesday, March 18, 1975, Eve met with her manager. Then she visited a company that promoted stars on the BS Water show. At 15:50, she returned home by subway. On the way, she stopped at a flower shop and bought a bunch of dried flowers wrapped in a plastic bag. She arrived home around 4:10 p.m. About 20 minutes later, the neighbor downstairs heard a man and a woman talking in her apartment, and their conversation seemed calm. About an hour later, at 5:15 p.m., the downstairs neighbor suddenly heard a loud noise. She thought someone might have dropped a chair. Then she heard the sound of someone leaving Eve's apartment and coming down the stairs. Just 10 minutes later, Eve's boyfriend, Tony, returned home with a friend and discovered a horrifying scene. His girlfriend, Eve Stratford, was lying on a mattress in the bedroom. Her throat had been cut so deeply that her head was nearly severed from her body. Her hands were bound behind her with a scarf, and her ankles were tied with stockings. She was wearing a pink bra, panties, and a blue nylon housecoat that was open in the front. Tony immediately called the police. The officers and detectives who arrived described it as one of the most gruesome scenes they had ever encountered. Upon examining the apartment, they found no signs of forced entry, indicating that Eve had likely let her attacker in. There were no signs of a struggle, and everything was in its usual place. The crime scene was filled with a disturbing, overpowering smell. Forensic experts later determined that she had been stabbed between 8 to 12 times in the neck. Additionally, they found semen from a strange man on her body. Police thoroughly searched the area around the house, including gardens, garbage bins, and drains, looking for evidence, but they did not find the murder weapon. The only thing they found was a torn magazine lying on the grass, with a picture of Eve on the cover. Detectives believe that the killer saw her picture in the magazine, found her address, and followed her to commit the terrible acts. Witnesses confirmed that Eve was walking alone from the metro station to her apartment, with the last person to see her being a neighbor. She was wearing a small hat and carrying a bag of dried flowers. The bouquet was found inside the apartment near the front door. There were drops of blood on the bag, proving that she had encountered the killer shortly after entering the house. Investigators noted that the dried flowers matched those in Eve's magazine photos. They also considered the possibility that the killer was a secret lover of Eva's, whom she had invited to her apartment. However, they considered this unlikely, as she knew that her boyfriend Tony could come home at any time. Based on witness accounts, a composite sketch of the suspect was created. Several people reported seeing an unknown man near her house. Witnesses described him as being between 30 and 40 years old, of average height, with a limp and a flushed face. One witness also said that the man had thick, curly black hair. Detectives interviewed 2 well-known celebrities who frequently interacted with Eve at the club. Their identities were not released, and there was no evidence to suggest they were involved in the crime. Waitresses from the club where Eve worked were also questioned, with some reporting receiving indecent phone calls the day before the tragedy. On the day of Eve's death, she received 3 mysterious phone calls. Each time she answered, there was silence on the other end, and then the call was disconnected. She had previously told friends that she felt she was being followed by a strange man near her home. She knew nothing about him, but remembered that his gait was tense and awkward. After the tragedy, Mayfair editor David Brenner refused to speak to the police. He only answered their questions by phone and claimed that he had never met Eve in person. Another individual involved in the case was Lebanese businessman Abdullah Kawaj, who dined at the Playboy Club daily. He had feelings for Eve and referred to her as his girlfriend. It is reported that they had a very close relationship and that Abdullah was involved in the criminal world. A waitress said that when she informed Abdullah of Eve's death, he cried at the table. He became one of the suspects, and this made him feel uncomfortable because people around him had discovered his secret relationship with Eve. A few months after Eve's murder, a man reported to the police that he had rented a flat to 2 people. When they moved out and he began cleaning, he found a newspaper clipping about Eve's murder in the closet. The clipping was stained with a woman's lipstick. He also found a photograph of Eve stabbed in several places with needles. Unfortunately, the evidence collected did not help the police solve the case. The murder weapon was never found, and as time passed, the likelihood of finding and punishing the perpetrator diminished. Eve's murder attracted a great deal of media attention. Londoners mourned her death, but there were also those who believed that she deserved it because of her promiscuous lifestyle. Some even showed their disdain by vandalizing her grave multiple times. Eve's parents were harassed with obscene phone calls, leading to a nervous breakdown for her mother, Liza. Meanwhile, on September 3, 1975, another girl, Lynn, was murdered in a different part of London. She was only 16 years old when the incident occurred. She was attacked from behind with a hard object to the head and then sexually assaulted. She was born on November 11, 1958. She was a good, diligent girl who had just graduated from high school and was planning to go to college to become a secretary. She was fluent in English, German, and French. On September 3, Lynn was returning home from a cafe where she had spent time with friends. She said goodbye to them around 11:00 p.m. and decided to take a shortcut through a dark alley. She had previously stated that she would never go into that area at night because she knew there were many homeless people there. However, that night, she decided to take a shortcut through that alley. Around 11:20 p.m., as she walked through the alley, she was struck on the head with a heavy object, likely a metal pipe, which resulted in a fractured skull. The attacker then threw her body over a fence into the grounds of an electrical substation to avoid detection. He assaulted she and left, leaving behind traces of his DNA on her body. The next morning, a local security officer discovered Lynn just a few minutes' walk from her home. When the scene was searched, no murder weapon was found. Despite her severe injuries, she was still alive but unconscious. She was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, she died a week later. The police quickly launched an investigation and discovered a witness who was walking his dog around the time Lynn was attacked. He reported seeing a white man in the dark alley. Another witness mentioned seeing a man running through the alley. Although they all described the same individual, police were unable to find a suspect. Initially, police believed she was attacked by a friend of European origin. However, upon further investigation, they discovered that it was likely that her attacker had been stalking and lying in wait for her for several hours before carrying out the attack. Despite extensive investigation, police have not found any significant clues, and the case remains unsolved. On September 9, 1977, nearly 2 years after Lynn's death, another murder took place. 27 years old Elizabeth Paravincina was killed just 1.5 kilometers from where Lynn was attacked. Police immediately suspected that the two cases were related. Like Lynn, Elizabeth was walking home late at night on the same street, but in a slightly different direction. She was almost home when she was suddenly attacked from behind with a blunt object. He then dragged her body into the bushes. However, there were no signs of a struggle on her body. Police suspected that the perpetrator panicked about something, causing him to run away without leaving a trace. Witnesses reported a strange man in the area, and a composite sketch was created. But this did not help solve the case. Over time, several more crimes occurred with no suspects identified. Despite attempts to link the cases, only a few common features were found. By 2004, with the advancement of science and DNA testing, Eve's case was linked to Lynn's. The DNA from sperm found in both victims was identical, indicating they were attacked by the same man 6 months apart. Police now believe that both murders were committed by a serial killer who remains at large because his DNA is not in prison databases. The investigations into the cases of Eve and Lynn have been reopened. Police collected DNA samples from all suspects, including those who are deceased. For example, Abdullah's DNA was taken through his son, but no match was found. In 2015, on the 40th anniversary of Eve's murder, police appeared on television appealing for information and offering a $50,000 reward for information that could lead to the capture of her killer. Crucially, prior to 1995, DNA was not collected from people who had been in prison. This means that the perpetrator may have been arrested and imprisoned for other crimes before. It is possible that he shared information about his crimes with someone. Police have sought information from psychiatrists, inmates, and prison guards regarding the girls' murders. In 2020, former officer Chris Clark claimed that serial killer Peter Sutcliffe was responsible for at least 30 additional cold cases, including Eve's murder. In an exclusive interview shortly after Peter's death, Chris stated that while reviewing information on Peter's cases, he noticed many similarities in methods and motives. Peter was convicted in 1981 for 13 murders and 7 attempted murders. Before his arrest, he was married and worked as a truck driver, frequently traveling across England. It was discovered that he had been in the vicinity of Eve's home for a relative's wedding. The wedding took place on Saturday, March 22, 1975, just 4 days after Eve was murdered. At that time, Peter was 29 years old. Peter was in London during the week Lynn was killed. He was staying in a house in North London, about 6.5 kilometers from the site of Lynn's attack. Peter died in 2020 at the age of 74. Unfortunately, the police were unable to collect a full blood sample before his death. Currently, the national database only has swabs from his mouth and hair. His records indicate he is likely responsible for multiple attacks on women from 1969 to the 1980s. Aside from the 20 proven cases, the remaining cases are just police speculation. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sierra Halseth. Sierra was a sweet young girl who loved spending time with her father, taking lots of pictures together. However, she burned those pictures and ran away with her boyfriend. She later blamed her father for everything, claiming that he had abused her. But was her words true? If so, why had no one heard of them before? Here is the full story of Sierra Halseth, her sudden change in behavior, and the tragic death of Daniel Halseth. Daniel Halseth was born in January 1976. He earned his bachelor's degree in music from Western Oregon University, where he was known for his drumming skills. He then pursued a degree in business, with the goal of becoming a successful businessman, and he eventually achieved that goal. At the age of 20, he met Elizabeth, the youngest woman ever elected to the Nevada State Senate. They got married in March 2001, which led Daniel to move to Nevada. The couple had 3 children: Dana, Jordan, and Sierra. They settled in Las Vegas because Daniel found a job there, but the family was not happy for a long time. 10 years after their wedding, Daniel and Elizabeth divorced. In October 2011, Daniel was arrested after Elizabeth accused him of trying to force her to have sex, even though they were still legally married. A month later, he filed for divorce, accusing Elizabeth of cheating on him. Sierra's siblings were still young when their parents divorced, but the family's troubles continued. Daniel and Elizabeth both remarried quickly. Despite this, Daniel and his ex-wife Elizabeth maintained their relationship for the sake of their children and even maintained a joint bank account. However, due to the constant instability, Elizabeth began a custody battle that lasted until Sierra started high school. Eventually, Dana and Jordan moved in with Elizabeth, while Sierra stayed with Daniel. The father and daughter have a close bond, and Daniel often shares photos of him and Sierra having fun together on social media, showing his love for his youngest daughter. In June 2020, Sierra began dating 18-year-old Aaron Guerrero, who was 2 years her senior. Unlike typical high school relationships, their relationship progressed quickly. They began making alarming plans for the future, including robbing their parents and running away to California. Both sets of parents quickly noticed negative changes in Sierra and Aaron's behavior, fearing that the situation would worsen if the kids spent time together. Unfortunately, the parents' worries and concerns led the couple to make poor choices. By Christmas 2020, Aaron and Sierra's families decided that the young couple should stop dating, and they were officially banned from dating. While it may seem like Sierra and Aaron are following their parents' wishes, that is not the case. Sierra and Aaron quietly waited for the right moment to carry out their plan of revenge against their families. Their goal was to eliminate their parents who had hindered their relationship. On December 16, 2020, Sierra's father, Daniel, wrote a heartfelt post for her birthday, expressing his love for her. He shared that when he was 9 years old, he dreamed of having a big family and always wanted to be a great father. He expressed his happiness that he had fulfilled that dream, especially because he had Sierra. Little did he know that Sierra was plotting to kill him at the time. On April 3, 2021, Daniel shared an old video online of him and his daughter having fun together, saying that they were enjoying their time. 5 days later, Sierra ran away from home. That same day, another unusual thing happened. $1,300 was withdrawn from her parents' joint bank account without any notice. Elizabeth found this strange because Daniel would never withdraw such a large amount of money without informing her. Elizabeth sent Daniel a text message, but he did not respond all day. By this point, many people, including Elizabeth and his mother, Christina, were worried because Daniel had stopped answering his phone. Elizabeth then texted her daughter, Sierra, to ask how Daniel was doing. Surprisingly, Sierra replied that Daniel's phone was broken, but he was fine. However, Daniel's family grew increasingly concerned. They knew he could use his laptop to communicate, and if his phone was broken, he could fix it quickly. Daniel regularly posting videos on Instagram and sharing his thoughts on Twitter with many followers. His mother was aware of this, so his sudden silence was concerning to her. She asked a family friend to check if Daniel was at home. The family friend contacted Sierra to find out where her father was. Sierra replied that he was in the shower. The friend then asked why Daniel wasn't answering his phone. Sierra explained that her phone was broken. She assured the family friend that she would have her father call back from another phone as soon as he finished showering. However, that didn't happen, and the next day, Sierra stopped answering calls and texts. Christina's increasingly concerned when Sierra did not respond to her texts. Concerned, she decided to call her niece, but Sierra only said that her father was in the shower. In a fit of rage, Christina threatened to call the police, causing Sierra to stop answering her phone altogether. That day, surveillance footage showed Daniel's blue Nissan leaving the area, causing Christina to become even more concerned. She continued to call on Wednesday, debating whether to contact the police or have Peggy and Joey come over. Eventually, Sierra stopped answering her phone altogether. Meanwhile, Joey and Peggy, Daniel's landlords and close friends, were on their way, but they informed Christina that it would take a few hours for them to arrive because they were out of town. Christina was so worried that she decided to call 911 to report that her son, Daniel, had been missing for 2 days. Daniel had been absent from work, and friends and family had been unable to reach him. Christina noted that Daniel was not usually like this. He lived with his daughter, who was also not returning calls or texts. The most worrying detail was that money had been withdrawn from Daniel's account at 3 different ATMs. Police were then dispatched to the address, but Joe and Peggy had already arrived. When Joey and Peggy arrived at Daniel's house, they found the front door open and Daniel's car gone. They cautiously walked inside and immediately smelled a strong smell of smoke. They searched every room in the house, but found only the remains of a fire. There was no sign of Daniel. However, things took a turn for the worse when they entered the garage. In the middle of the garage, they saw a sleeping bag with something inside. Upon inspection, they discovered Daniel's body, burned beyond recognition. Joey quickly called the police and told them they were the homeowners. They had just arrived and discovered that a fire had broken out in the house 2 days earlier. Joey also mentioned that he had seen a body in a sleeping bag in the garage. A few minutes later, the police arrived at their address. During their investigation, they confirmed that Daniel, 45, had been brutally murdered. The forensic team discovered a significant amount of shocking evidence in Daniel's home. First, they found a chainsaw carelessly left on the living room floor. In the kitchen, there was another saw with blood smeared along its edge, and 2 knives were found in the sink. The police also located a receipt from a store and an ATM. Despite signs of a fire in the living room and the bloody saw in the kitchen, it was evident that someone had made serious efforts to clean the house. Daniel's autopsy revealed a gruesome scene. He had suffered 70 slash wounds. Most of these injuries were to his head, neck, and torso. His body, burned beyond recognition, was stuffed into a sleeping bag and moved to the garage. Police concluded that the person responsible for Daniel's death harbored intense hatred, as evidenced by the brutal stabbing and beating he endured. After he died, the attacker even burned his body in the living room. When the police spoke to the family, it was clear that there were no obvious suspects. No one could understand why Daniel had such a vicious enemy. However, Christina noted that Sierra had been acting very strangely. When asked about Daniel's situation, she always replied that her father was taking a shower. And then Sierra stopped contacting Christina completely. Additionally, Sierra had gone missing from the house. On April 9, police received a tip that led them to a receipt from a local store and access to surveillance camera footage. They discovered that Aaron had purchased a saw and gloves. That same day, Sierra was seen in the footage leaving the store with 2 bottles of bleach, using Daniel's credit card to make the purchase. Police quickly gathered information about Aaron. They learned that both families had forbidden Aaron and Sierra from seeing each other, so he ran away from home on April 8. With the addition of surveillance footage, police had enough evidence to issue arrest warrants for them. On April 13, police arrested Sierra and Aaron 400 miles from their home in Salt Lake City, Utah, for not paying their bus fare. When police conducted a background check, they discovered that the couple was wanted for murder. Additionally, police discovered Daniel's blue Nissan, the car Sierra and Aaron had used to get away. Inside the trunk, they found a bloody blanket. Police seized Sierra and Aaron's phones as evidence. They examined the contents and found a disturbing video on Sierra's phone. In the video, Sierra and Aaron talked about killing Daniel without showing any remorse. After Sierra and Aaron were arrested in Utah, they were taken to the Clark County Detention Center in Nevada. The investigation at the crime scene revealed that Sierra and Aaron intended to dismember Daniel, as a chainsaw and a handsaw were discovered in the house and had been recently purchased for that purpose. As a result, Sierra and Aaron face multiple charges, including murder, arson, conspiracy to commit robbery, and 4 counts of fraudulent use of a credit or debit card. On June 15, 2021, Sierra and Aaron pleaded not guilty at their initial hearing. The case has attracted attention, especially because Sierra seems to have no remorse for her actions against her father. Many were shocked by her seeming indifference. Sierra's defense said her parents' divorce and the long custody battle had a significant impact on Sierra. The therapist then explained that this type of trauma can significantly disrupt a child's development. If Sierra had previously experienced emotional trauma, any change or loss could have added to her feelings of despair. Daniel's family has stated that Sierra and Aaron's complete lack of remorse is reprehensible and inexcusable. They expect justice to be served in the most serious manner. They loved Daniel deeply and miss him. This will be their only statement. In May 2022, Sierra Halseth and Aaron Guerrero agreed to a plea deal. However, it is unclear whether the couple truly felt remorse or whether they agreed to the plea deal in exchange for a lighter sentence. The judge sentenced Sierra and Aaron to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 22 years. This was part of the deal they made when they pleaded guilty to murder and other charges. After 22 years, they could be released around the age of 40, which would give them a chance to start over. After the verdict, Daniel's mother, Christina, spoke to the press, expressing her grief. Christina said that Sierra had shown no remorse for the murder she had committed. In fact, during the trial, Sierra tried to blame Daniel, claiming that she had been forced into the act. Sierra said that her father had assaulted her, pinned her down, and beat her. However, Christina pointed out that Sierra could have reported the incident to the police, but instead chose a different and more tragic course of action. In a surprising turn of events, Aaron was the only one to apologize for his actions. He sought forgiveness from Daniel's family, who noticed that Aaron showed remorse and emotion, unlike Sierra. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Lydia Guardo. Raymond Guardo married Jacqueline in 1956. In the early years of their marriage, they had 2 children, a son named Bruno and a daughter named Nadia. At first, their family appeared to be typical and happy. However, after Nadia's birth, Raymond was convicted of armed robbery and sentenced to 5 years in prison. While Raymond was in prison, his wife Jacqueline began an affair with another man and became pregnant. When she was allowed to visit him in prison, she informed him that the child was not his. Despite this, he tolerated his wife's infidelity and expressed his desire to adopt the child. Soon, on November 13, 1960, the girl was born, named Lydia Guardo. Years later, Raymond was released from prison, but his relationship with his wife Jacqueline has worsened. She was left alone to care for their 3 children and seemed to have little affection for them. So she decided to send her children to an orphanage, and soon after, her children were adopted by a family. Fortunately, the children were placed with a loving family that provided them with everything they needed to begin a new chapter in their lives. With this support, Bruno, the oldest child, always held onto the hope that his biological parents would come for him and his younger sisters. He even encouraged his sisters to believe that this would happen one day. While still in prison, Raymond saw an advertisement in the newspaper for a woman named Lucienne Ulpat, who was seeking a pen pal. After his release, he found Lucienne and soon married her. Following the marriage, he became determined to reclaim his children by any means. One night, he took a gun and broke into the home of the family that was taking care of his children. The noise frightened the girls. Nadia didn't remember what her father, Raymond, looked like, and Lydia had never seen him before. They thought he might be a kidnapper and were worried that they might be in danger. Raymond successfully took the children from their foster family and placed them in his car, despite their threats to call the police. After several hours of driving, he brought the children to his home, where he introduced them to Lucienne, telling them that she was their new mother and that they would need to follow her rules. During the first years of living together, everything seemed quite stable, at least judging by family photos from the time. The family moved to a new house in a quiet neighborhood. Raymond received a cash allowance and started his own business, which focused on instant postcard printing and various office tasks. Lucienne occasionally worked in his company, but primarily handled office work. However, as time passed, the family's life began to change dramatically. The children suffered abuse from their father, Raymond, and stepmother, Lucienne. Lydia's first memory from this period was witnessing Raymond beat Bruno for playing with a neighbor's child. When Raymond and Lucienne went to work, they hired young girls to care for the children. Upon returning home, he would pressure these girls to drink alcohol with him. On one occasion, he even attempted to persuade one of the girls to have sex, but she managed to escape. The girl's father then came to the house to confront Raymond and seriously injured him. After that incident, Raymond stopped hiring nannies. Later, he bought a trailer to take his family on vacation to the beach. Once they arrived, they spent time swimming and relaxing like other vacationers. However, an unsettling event occurred. While in the water, Raymond approached his daughter, Nadia, and pressed her against him inappropriately. She struggled to escape his grip, but this only made things worse. From that point on, she became the target of Raymond's abuse. Lydia recalls one day, she heard Nadia's cries coming from the trailer. This marked the beginning of Raymond's sexual abuse of one of his daughters. After that, parents, Raymond and Lucienne, often beat and do other terrible things to their children. Bruno and Nadia stopped going to elementary school, while Lydia, who had never been to school, faced severe mistreatment. This may have been because she was not Raymond's biological daughter. A few years later, around 1971, when Lydia was over 8 years old, the bullying began to get worse. The first incident occurs when Lucienne gets angry because Lydia comes home dirty after playing outside. Her stepmother, Lucienne, put her in a bathtub filled with boiling water and bleach. She recalls that her sensitive skin began to peel and float to the surface of the water. Hearing her screams, Raymond rushed into the bathroom, pulled she out, and laid her on the bed. He attempted to treat her burns with vegetable oil, but soon realized the injuries were severe. Then, she was taken to the hospital, and doctors determined she had third-degree burns. So that Lucienne wouldn't be responsible for the incident, Raymond blamed the city government for providing too hot water. Meanwhile, Lydia was transferred to the intensive care unit and then to the burns unit at the Lion City Hospital, where she remained for several months. She also underwent several skin grafts. Raymond is always by Lydia's side, not because he was a good father, but just to keep her from sharing the incident with others. Eventually, he grew weary of the situation and declared that he would take she home to continue her treatment. Medical professionals were against this decision, but Raymond secured the support of their family doctor, who wrote a confirming that he would continue to treat Lydia. Consequently, Raymond picked Lydia up and carried her out of the burn unit. Back home, Raymond begins to take care of Lydia. He regularly changed her dressings and started to touch her inappropriately. One day, he came home with a camera, claiming he needed to take pictures for the insurance company. He first photographed Lydia, asking her to smile, and then took pictures of her private areas. He then told the girl that the family doctor had prescribed this medicine. He forced her to inhale that drug, leaving her in a semi-conscious state. Although she was aware that he was about to do something strange and painful, she was unable to resist. At that time, he was sexually assaulting she. During this time, Raymond's wife, Lucienne, did not intervene. Instead, she encouraged his behavior. For 9 years, Lydia came to see what was happening as normal. She believed her father, Raymond, loved her, which led her to think there was nothing wrong with his actions. Years later, in an interview with a French television show, Lydia explained how Raymond justified his horrific actions. He told his children that he was doing this for their well-being. He also claimed that, as their father, he had the right to do so. In 1975, the Guardo family moved to the village of Coulombe, about 40 kilometers from Paris. At their new home, Raymond and Lucienne continued to abuse their children. The teenagers still did not attend school and had very little contact with the outside world. After returning to work, Raymond managed to get permission to park his printing van at a shopping center. To attract attention, he displayed photos of Lydia's burned legs on the van. Next to the photos, there were posters announcing that Lydia's injuries were due to the negligence of the authorities, and that they had yet to compensate her. Thus, he created the image of a father, calling for public attention and justice. When he felt that the photos alone weren't enough, Raymond forced Lydia to accompany him so that people could see her scars. He used the sympathy of bystanders to sell his goods and make money. Bruno was the first to try to stop the abuse from Raymond and Lucienne. Before that, Bruno, Nadia, and Lydia tried to escape, but they were caught and punished. Despite this, Bruno, who had suffered years of physical abuse, eventually managed to escape. According to some sources, Bruno contacted the authorities to report his family's problem. However, the authorities did not take his claims seriously. Meanwhile, his younger sisters, Nadia and Lydia, continued to suffer from Raymond's behavior. As they grew older, their bodies began to change. Noticing this, Raymond bandaged his daughters' chests with elastic bandages, making it difficult for them to breathe. The bandages eventually became tattered and dirty, as he did not allow them to be removed for months. He did not want anyone other than himself to touch his daughters. Years later, Bruno returned to rescue his sister Nadia, who was now an adult. He successfully saved her, but Lydia remained in danger. Raymond confined her to the dark, damp attic, where he abused her multiple times a day. She felt betrayed by her siblings for leaving her behind. She tried to escape from home several times, but Raymond spread rumors that she was mentally ill. So every time she tried to contact the authorities, they immediately brought her back home. After another escape attempt, Raymond even chained her up to keep her from fleeing again. When Lydia turned 18, Raymond decided it was time for her to have children. He was so determined to make this happen that after each intimate encounter, he would tie her legs together to supposedly increase the chances of her getting pregnant. At 19, she became pregnant for the first time, and for almost the entire 9 months of her pregnancy, she was kept on a leash. This was to prevent her from having an abortion. She gave birth to her first child on December 8, 1982. Despite becoming a mother, Lydia continued to try to escape, but Raymond caught her repeatedly and punished her harshly. On one occasion, he locked her in the attic for 6 months. During this time, she suffered abuse from Raymond and Lucienne, who often used kitchen utensils as weapons. The only companions she had were rats. She went on to have 5 more children between 1986 and 1996. Her youngest child, a boy named Rudy, is not Raymond's but someone else's, conceived while she was trying to escape. Raymond took great pride in his children, who initially did not even know who their real mother was. Neighbors, grocery store owners, and authorities representatives all came to congratulate him on having a large family and pay their respects. Every time Lydia was ready to give birth, Raymond would take her to a hospital outside the border. There, with threats to kill her, he would force her to say that he was her husband and the father of her children. He was skilled at manipulating and she felt powerless to resist him. It all ended in 1999. Raymond, who was diabetic, began to suffer serious health issues due to his neglect of his well-being. One day, his condition deteriorated, resulting in the amputation of several toes on his left foot. After the surgery, he continued to ignore the doctor's advice, and his health condition worsened. One day, Lydia visited Raymond in the hospital and learned that he had died the night before from a pulmonary embolism. This news brought her to tears, as she seemed to forget all the pain he had caused her. Before the death of the man who had abused her for a long time, she could not understand why she felt so sad. As Lydia left the hospital, she recalled how Raymond once forced her to promise that she would end her life immediately after his death. Years of his control had deeply affected her mindset. She walked to the nearest bridge and, in a moment of despair, jumped into the river. After she fell, she lost consciousness. Then, rescuers had pulled her from the water. In that moment, she realized that the horrors of her past were finally behind her. Thus, the 28-year saga of bullying, sexual assault, and imprisonment ended. She was free at last. After Lydia was released, she faced many challenges. As an illiterate and unemployed young woman, she needed to rebuild her life. She also had to reconnect with her children, who had been raised by Raymond and Lucienne without any contact with her. Fortunately, after years of neglecting the issue, the authorities began to support her. Initially, she was allowed to stay in the house where she had been held captive, although she was too afraid to go into the attic, the site of her abuse. Lydia's stepmother, Lucienne, who was 68 at the time, went to trial in 2007. She received a 3-year suspended sentence for failing to stop the crimes committed by Raymond. In 2008, this sentence was appealed and increased to 4 years probation. Lydia bravely shared her story with everyone. Despite still being illiterate, she collaborated with journalists and writer Jean-Michel Radem to publish a book about her difficult journey to freedom. In her book, Lydia criticized many government agencies. According to her, during the days when she escaped, they made her fall back into a bad situation without trying to understand the situation. She was especially critical of her stepmother, Lucienne, who not only ignored her suffering, but also actively participated in the physical abuse. She also criticized Bruno, Nadia, and medical workers who treated her injuries from burns, bruises, and cuts. She claims that medical staff ignored the obvious signs of her mistreatment and chose to remain uninvolved. Additionally, she criticizes her neighbors for not contacting any social services despite hearing the daily screams of children. Finally, Lydia expressed her disappointment with the French justice system for going easy on Lucienne. After publishing her book, the public became aware of the horrors she endured. Though some people advised her against sharing her story, she firmly believes that victims of such crimes should share their experiences, as it may help protect others. After gaining her freedom, Lydia met Sylvain Skurla. He seemed to come into her life to help heal her from the pain she had suffered. Shortly after they met, They got married and had 2 children. She expressed that she found hope in her husband and began to embrace life again. She participated in several media interviews and documentaries about her experiences, with Sylvain always by her side. However, the indelible traces of her time in captivity still remained in her heart. The scars on her body were a reminder of her past and the struggles she had gone through. With the help of a lawyer, Lydia appealed to the Judicial Commission for compensation. In her appeal, she detailed the torture and abuse she endured from Raymond and Lucienne, as well as her lack of access to education, which hindered her ability to find work. Additionally, she was not registered in the Social Security system because she could not write, preventing her from completing necessary forms. She also mentioned that burns she suffered as a child resulted in a degree of disability. Therefore, it was essential for Lydia to achieve several goals. First, to have her status as a victim recognized. Second, to receive financial assistance from the state to buy a home, ensuring she would never return to the place where she was tortured. On November 16, 2009, the Victims' Compensation Commission awarded Lydia over $100,000 in compensation. Her children, whom she had with Raymond, also received financial support. It was reported that they all found stable jobs, rebuilt their lives, and started their own families. Now, at 61 years old, Lydia has had a long and challenging journey to achieve a happy life. She needed specialized treatment for her emotional and physical scars for many years. However, with Sylvain's support, she was able to begin again. Despite everything she has gone through, she remains a strong and cheerful woman. Later, Lydia re-established communication with Bruno and Nadia. However, she admits that she still feels anger towards Bruno for not taking her with him. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Jen Carson. James Carson was a typical American in the 80s. He married a girl named Lynn, and they had a daughter named Jen. James was not particularly intelligent. He was more focused on family and children, always treating his loved ones with great love. He was a devoted father, but during that time, the hippie culture was gaining momentum, and James did not shy away from it. He loved to have fun and indulged in the forbidden. Nevertheless, his daughter remembered him as a very caring man who often told her stories at night. James did not work. Instead, his more educated wife, who had a decent job, provided for the family. At first, it appeared to be a loving union, but over the years, striking changes began to occur in him. He became increasingly rude and aggressive, bought himself a gun, and periodically threatened his wife with it. Lynn decided it was better to separate after 10 years of marriage. Their 5-year-old daughter Jen was too young to understand what was happening. Most of the events that unfolded remained a mystery to her until she grew older and learned the shocking truth about her father. However, the key character in this story is not only James but also Susan, a woman born into a wealthy family in the 60s. Her father was a highly successful producer who granted her a lavish lifestyle. She could only dream of such a life. She married another wealthy man, resulting in 2 children. However, as Susan's children reached their teenage years, she grew weary of the daily routine and wanted to get the most out of life. Therefore, she began a second secret life, which she kept hidden from her family. Susan became quite dissolute, preferring much younger men with whom she engaged in intimate relationships. One of her young lovers introduced her to banned substance, which had become widespread at that time. This marked the beginning of the end of her idyllic life. It turned out that Susan had not only secret affairs but also mental health issues, which no one had ever addressed. The lack of treatment combined with her reckless lifestyle led to exacerbations of her condition, resulting in regular hallucinations, even when she was in a normal state of consciousness. One day, Her husband returned home from work to find triangles drawn on all the walls. Susan spoke of visual hallucinations and showed signs of schizophrenia. Her husband uncovered her little secrets about her affairs on the side and discovered her mental disorders. However, he did not condemn his wife and took the situation calmly. Unfortunately, he was not willing to help her and simply filed for divorce. Given the problems Susan was facing, he easily obtained full custody of their children. This outcome seemed to suit her completely. She did not even attempt to challenge the court's decision. Now she was alone, without her children, and still full of a desire to have fun. Additionally, after the divorce, Susan received a substantial amount of money, which led her to throw a big party at her home, where James also appeared. Susan was almost 10 years older than James, yet he fit her interests. Their acquaintance was intensified by the use of strong illegal substances. Susan's issues escalated to such a degree that she began to believe she was hallucinating. Their meeting coincided with James's divorce, and nothing could restrain the lovers. Several months passed, and their strange relationship was marked by emotional highs and lows. Later, Susan said that she had immediately fallen in love with James and that he became the man of her dreams. He officially changed his name to Michael Bear Carson, and in 1978, they went on a trip to Europe in search of their spiritual followers. Soon, the situation only worsened, as all of Susan's savings from the divorce were spent on banned substances and entertainment. At this time, Michael was under her complete control. They believed in a fictitious religion centered around Susan, who claimed she could see those possessed by demons, distinguish witches, sorcerers, and other dangerous entities. Meanwhile, Michael became a sort of instrument for executing witches. During this period, Lynn fought to obtain full custody of Jen. Lynn succeeded, but on weekends, Jen had to visit her father and stepmother. Jen found herself in a poorly organized home. She was only 4 years old at the time, later recalled entering the house to find it nearly empty, with many trees planted in pots throughout the interior. She described it as a kind of magic forest, as the house held little more than a single waterbed for sleeping. From her later memories, weekends at her father's house felt like a horror movie. She did not like Susan, whom she described as a villain from a cartoon. It seemed that her father and stepmother were ignoring her existence. Jen instinctively felt that women should not eat, and later she discovered that she preferred to starve all weekend rather than eat the food offered to her. Despite the difficulties Jen faced, she initially did not tell her mother about the frightening real-life stories that haunted her. Instead, her memories from her early years were often filled with something terrifying. Jen remembered well that Susan considered her possessed by demons, punished her by scratching her back, while her father blindly believed everything his beloved Susan said and supported any punishment. Jen could do nothing to resist the much stronger adults. Susan repeatedly tried to conduct some kind of exorcism right on Jen, and during one of these sessions, Jen's body bore 5 marks resembling claw scars. When Lynn noticed these marks, she was alarmed and wondered what was happening in that house. She tried to ask Jen about it, but because of her young age, it was difficult for the girl to explain. Nevertheless, Lynn still sensed that something was wrong. It became clear to her that James's transformation into Michael was not an accidental event. In marriage, he had become much more aggressive. Lynn now believed that her daughter was in danger. Attempts to reach James were futile, as he was completely under Susan's influence. Contrary to the court's decision, Lynn took her daughter and ran away with her. Until that moment, they had lived in Phoenix, Arizona, and now they had moved to California. Lynn did not tell anyone their new address because she feared that if her actions were revealed, Jen would be taken away and that she would lose any opportunity to see her. She felt that Jen would not survive to enter school. Lynn did not want to contact law enforcement at all, knowing how slowly the system worked. Realizing that anything could happen during an investigation, she decided not to waste time. Lynn had to quit her job, and they lived very poorly after the escape, relying on random earnings. This escape became the second significant event in Jen's life. The first was the sudden divorce of her parents, which she never understood because her mother and father had once seemed to love each other. As she grew older, she supported Lynn's actions. Her mother explained that her father was sick, and they just needed to stay away from him to avoid being infected. In reality, James and Susan's way of life became eccentric, spending money on substances while neither worked. They decided to move to California, possibly because, during a moment of clarity, Michael wanted to reclaim his daughter, or maybe he thought things would be better there. They had no idea where they could find Jen and Lynn after moving. After days of wandering, Susan and Michael settled in San Francisco, where they met a girl named Karen Barnes, who was then 23 years old. Karen dreamed of becoming an actress and moved to California to try her luck in acting. Unfortunately, during this period, she met Susan and Michael, who willingly shared information about their cult. This unhealthy behavior intrigued her. The entire group ended up in a rented apartment since Susan and Michael could no longer afford housing. Karen became the first person to join this cult. She was attractive and immediately caught Michael's eye. However, he could not betray Susan behind her back, so he approached Karen openly and told her that he believed she should become his second wife. This proposition was unacceptable to Susan. She claimed to have seen the future and insisted that Karen was a witch who intended to destroy the cult and kill them both. Michael believed Susan so completely that he feared her power and obeyed her without question. Susan easily convinced him that he had to deal with Karen, making her the first victim of their cult. Michael agreed, waiting for Karen to arrive after taking a cast iron frying pan and a knife. On March 7, 1981, he hit Karen on the head to stun her and then stabbed her, inflicting 13 wounds to her face and neck in what seemed to be a ritual murder. They wrapped Karen's body in a blanket, placed her head on a pillow, and drew a series of strange symbols on the walls before leaving. Karen's dream of becoming an actress was shattered. When the door was broken down, her skull was discovered in a pool of blood, but no trace of the criminals was found, except for the drawings, which included the name Susan. The apartment had been rented by Karen, and aside from a superficial description from neighbors, there was no information about Michael and Susan. They fled, fully aware that they needed to distance themselves from the crime scene. They hitchhiked north and lived for a year in a secluded cabin in the wilderness, where no one could find them. Very little is known about this period in their lives. A year later, feeling bored, they discovered an illegal marijuana farm outside the city and decided to go there. It was quite a large illegal organization with a lot of work and a shortage of workers. Susan tended to the plants while Michael monitored the safety of the operation, and together they continued to live their typical hippie lifestyle, remaining constantly intoxicated from substances. A young man named Clark Stevens intervened in the matter. He was a 26-year-old guy, a friend of the plantation owner. Clark was well versed in growing illegal plants, but he drank a lot, and he had his own vision that contradicted Susan's opinion. Clark took the initiative, began giving advice. Susan did not like how actively Clark was interfering in their activities. It seemed as if he was too arrogant. She turned to her husband, declaring that this man was encroaching on the sacred, putting the profit of their religion below him, which was unacceptable. Susan told Michael that she had a vision in which Clark turned out to be an evil sorcerer. Naturally, this statement automatically became a death sentence for Clark. After Clark's murder, Michael obtained a gun. It is unknown where exactly it came from. In any case, he did not use it at first. He carried it with him to guard the farm. After Clark was dealt with, his body was doused with gasoline and burned. The remains were disposed of by burying them not far from this forbidden plantation in the forest. Later, the date of death was set as May 12, 1982. It is curious that this farm was located no more than a kilometer from residential buildings. In early summer of the same year, one of the families had an outdoor barbecue. They did not go deep into their yard but moved to the far part of a large plot of land. They had a large dog that they let run around. The animal went into the forest, as if attracted by something, and when it returned, the owners noticed something strange in its mouth. When the dog approached the married couple, they discovered it was carrying a part of a human skull. Naturally, the family called the police. Law enforcement officers discovered an illegal farm that had been abandoned in a hurry. No one was there, but a group of young people interviewed by the authorities told of a pair of dirty hippies who had fled the plantation quickly. They fled by hitchhiking again, disappearing into the territory of the states. On May 1983, the area around the plantation was thoroughly searched by a team that went deep into the forest, where they found Clark's burial place and a tourist backpack. Inside, they found various items, a pistol, a fake ID, and also a manifesto describing the program of a cult-like religious organization called Hunt. The most disturbing item was a list of names and surnames of so-called witches and sorcerers that included even popular figures such as Ronald Reagan, the current president of the United States, as well as the governor of the state. The police were particularly interested in two other names, Clark and Karen, who were already listed as killed. In total, the list contained 12 people, consisting of ordinary citizens. However, it turned out to be impossible to establish their fates precisely, as there was nothing specifying either addresses or phone numbers. Due to the possibility of a national security issue, the Federal Bureau of Investigation began a search. During this period of Jen's life, terrible changes began to occur. Her father, Michael, called Lynn and said that he was returning to California and intended to take Jen. Lynn did not give him the address. She was very scared because she could not even contact the police for protection. However, this did not even need to be done because just a few hours after Michael's call, FBI agents arrived at her home. The authorities already knew that Michael was actually James Carson, and Lynn was his ex-wife. Jen was the daughter whom the ex-wife had actually kidnapped. Despite this, they treated Lynn's act leniently, considering all the circumstances and the danger for Jen. The agents knew they were dealing with a very dangerous couple of criminals. In the father's desire to take Jen, they saw an opportunity to catch the killers. As far as the law enforcement officers knew at that time, Susan and Michael were hitchhiking, making it impossible to track their exact location. On May 12, 1983, in the car, a 30-year-old truck driver named John Hellier. A couple of young people who looked harmless were heading to California and picked up a other man. The only space in his car suitable for passengers was the cabin, but with 3 of them in the front, it was cramped. The hitchhikers began to settle inside when they climbed in. Michael saw this and was furious, as he perceived the contact of a mere mortal with the prophetess as a sign of disrespect. Susan supported his opinion. Michael took out other pistol, as the first one was thrown not far from the plantation. The cabin was cramped. John managed to start a fight. They fell out onto the road. Other motorists drove by, some even stopping to help, while Susan shouted to Michael that he had to finish off evil sorcerer. Realizing that a grown man could defeat her husband, Susan took a knife and approached John, stabbing the wounded driver. They run away, leaving John's body on the side of the highway in Napa County. Susan and Michael stole a truck and took off. However, witnesses reported to the police, which led to a big chase. Susan and Michael lost control and drove into a ditch. But they were not going to surrender. A shootout with the police began. The criminals managed to escape again, this time on foot. Susan and Michael then was miraculously detained after John's murder. No one was seriously hurt, and it was time for they of villains to face fair punishment. Although there was evidence that they had victimized others on the list, they were not required to confess, particularly to the murders of Karen and Clark. They could only be charged with the murder of John, as there were witnesses and irrefutable evidence. When Susan and Michael were brought in for questioning, they refused to cooperate with the police, demanded the involvement of all TV channels, press, and newspapers. They sought to turn their bloody tale into a major press conference in order to gain fame. Susan insisted that she was a clairvoyant, claiming this would allow them to attract as many followers as she wanted, specifically targeting young people who were as devoted as Michael. Naturally, law enforcement agencies did not want to give such attention to them. As the trial approached, their demands for media involvement were partially met, but not to the extent that Susan had wanted. There were several reporters in the courtroom. Susan claimed that President Reagan was a demon who needed to be killed. Law enforcement managed to extract the names of 2 victims. And Michael confessed to killing Clark, who had worked with them on a plantation of prohibited plants. He also spoke about the failed actress, Karen. Before the trial even began, everything Susan and Michael said seemed like a circus. Susan expressed absurd ideas that were later quoted in various reports. Several books were written about her prophecies, but few people took her claims seriously. Among Susan's statements was the assertion that all these murders were committed in self-defense. She concluded her speech by expressing her bewilderment at why their fight against evil warranted any accusations. The forensic expert detailed the atrocities committed by Susan and Michael, making it obvious that their actions had nothing to do with self-defense or fighting demons. They themselves were pure evil. Both were sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 75 years for 3 counts of murder. It was clear that the killers should never have been released. It seemed that everything was over, but Jen's life turned into a nightmare. She accidentally learned the whole truth about her father and stepmother, which came with shocking details. Consequently, she found it impossible to trust anyone. Realizing that her own father, the man who had personally fed her breakfast every day and combed her hair, was capable of such terrible evil, she understood that evil was everywhere, impossible to escape. In her youth, she slept with scissors and a knife under her pillow, believing it the only way she could close her eyes and fall asleep. This fear eventually transformed into a fear that she herself could become a manifestation of pure evil, because the blood of murderer ran in her veins. Thoughts of what her father had done haunted her relentlessly. At the age of 10, Jen even considered taking her own life. During that difficult time, she was actively supported by her mother, stepfather, and teachers. These close figures helped her resist despair, and she chose to embrace life. As a teenager, Jen dated various guys but found it hard to hide the truth about her father. Many learned who he was and subsequently broke up with her. Eventually, Jen concocted a story that he had died in a car accident, yet the truth became unbearable over time, prompting her to confess. Ultimately, she realized she had to confront her fear head-on. At the age of 20, Jen visited prison for the first time in years to see her father. During all this time, he had sent her letters every week, but their content was bizarre. When they finally met, she did not even use the transparent barrier and phone but met him in person. Her father hugged her, and she felt choked with horror as he told absurd stories about the fortune teller Susan. Speaking as though he had last seen her only yesterday, he was completely unaware that he had been locked away for the last 15 years. As she left the visit, she realized he had not changed a bit, nor did he feel guilty. The father who had loved her simply no longer existed. After this encounter, Jen contacted the families of Michael Carson's victims and apologized on his behalf. They all responded in the same way: she was not guilty and should not suffer for her father's crimes. After this, she began to manage her traumas, but her nightmares were far from over. In 2014, a reform of the correctional system was enacted, enabling Susan and Michael to request parole every 5 years. Jen's nightmares returned once again when Michael applied for parole for the first time. Jen was on the commission, but contrary to her previous stance, she argued that he was dangerous and did not regret the crimes he committed. She insisted that if he were released, he would kill again. The next attempt for parole took place in May 2020, but James was again refused. The court ruled that he would have the next opportunity no earlier than 10 years from then, which means in May 2030, when he turns 74, he will try to get out again. The situation with Susan was somewhat different. She also applied for parole in 2015, but her request was denied. The court ruled that she would not be eligible for another opportunity for 15 years. A lawyer took up her case, believing that this was too long a period. In 2023, the defense attorney's appeal was approved, so in December 2025, another hearing will be held, and Susan will have the right to seek parole. The families of the victims of these criminals, along with Jen Carson, are waiting with bated breath for this moment, praying that the commission will make a negative decision. Jen and her mother, Lynn, are still convinced that the real number of the killer's victims is much higher than 3. Determined to make a difference, Jen decided to devote her life to helping people, particularly those who are contemplating self-harm. For this purpose, she received a doctorate in social work. Now, while helping others, she has found peace. Jen understands that she cannot atone for her father's sins nor bring innocent victims back to life. She can only live her life in a way that brings as much light to the world as possible, and she is committed to doing this.